Chapter 72. Spirit Sword Mountain Non-Phase Peak. In a simple bamboo room, the master and disciple sat opposite to each other. The disciple respectfully poured a cup of hot tea and gave it to his master. His master was flattered. She immediately used more than 10 spells to carefully check the tea. After confirming that there was no poison, she carefully took a sip. It was indeed the tea of non-phase peak. It was bitter and astringent, basically tea residue. His master nodded with satisfaction. His disciple was indeed worthy to be her disciple. The spirit of hard work and plain living was very good. Life should be like this, the more frugal it could be. So, little Wang Lu, looking at your constipated expression, what do you want to ask? Wang Lu of course had something to ask. When his master returned from her wandering trip, she brought back a series of surprises. The questions in Wang Lu's mind had already piled up like a mountain. For example, the chivalrous act that was completely incompatible with her temperament, the magical swordsmanship of the king pill that broke the Yuanying stage, or the magical heart of Tao. Too many questions came to his mind at the same time, which made him not know where to start. However, what kind of person was Wang Lu? After thinking for a while, he sorted out the questions, arranged them according to their importance, and then asked the most important question first. Master, what exactly is going on between you and seventh martial uncle? The tea in her mouth was completely sprayed on her lapel. The woman in white didn't care that her wet lapel would expose her spring scenery. She asked in inexplicable surprise, "What nonsense are you talking about, you naughty brat? I and seventh martial uncle are innocent." Wang Lu nodded. Innocent as milk chocolate? Damn. You're already milk chocolate, how could you be innocent? Where did you learn such dirty thoughts at such a young age? Watch me brainwash you. The woman in white righteously reprimanded her disciple, and then stretched out her finger. An invisible sword chi pierced through the air and stabbed at Wang Lu's forehead. Of course, the sword chi didn't have any lethality. Not only was its strength only 1,000th of the king pill cultivators, it didn't have the sharpness that a sword chi should have. However, if one was stabbed by the sword chi, they would at least have a concussion for 2 or 3 days. However, the moment the sword chi touched his body, Wang Lu's body shook, and the 206 non-phase sword bones spontaneously trembled, completely dispersing the blunt force of the sword chi. Although the strong impact still brought him pain, it didn't matter. This change shocked even his master. Mastery of the 8th level of the sword bone? Kid, your progress is pretty good. It's only been a little more than a month and you've already completed the 8th level. Wait a minute, what are you doing? While speaking, Wang Wu suddenly flicked out another sword chi. This time the force was still not strong and the speed was also slow, but it contained a murderous intent. The moment the sharp sword chi shot out, it pierced Wang Lu's primordial spirit, causing a sharp pain in the center of his forehead. However, the physical pain didn't affect his reaction. Wang Lu suddenly raised his right hand and pointed his middle finger forward, just right on top of the sword chi. Bang! After a muffled sound, all the bones in Wang Lu's body trembled, and his internal organs seemed to have been displaced, which made him nauseous. However, in the end he was able to resolve the power of this sword chi. Not bad. Even a low-level foundation establishment cultivator would be seriously injured by that attack, but you were able to block it unscathed. It shows that you've already passed the first level of the sword bone mastery. This progress is really amazing. As the woman in white spoke, she frowned deeply. It's fine that you've mastered the first 8 levels. You have the aptitude of the void spirit root and are good at experience, so it's not surprising that your cultivation speed exceeded my expectations. But I don't remember teaching you the 9th level of the sword bone mastery. With your current accumulation, it's impossible for you to comprehend it on your own. Who taught you this? Wang Lu replied with difficulty, 7th martial uncle. The woman in white suddenly smiled sinisterly. 7th martial uncle? Is it that 7th martial uncle who has a big tool and is good at living? While I was away, the two of you got along quite well. Wang Lu forced a smile. Isn't that so? 7th martial uncle said that 5th martial sister's child is his child. Thanks to the adultery between the two of you, I was able to receive martial uncle's help and improve my cultivation greatly. Oh, you've become 7th martial uncle's child? Is this the posture of worshipping him as your godfather? The vulgar attacks of the master and disciple continued for a long time until a simple and honest black man who was cultivating spiritual plants in Blue Cloud Peak sneezed continuously. Finally, both of them felt bored and stopped talking at the same time. Say it, what do you want to ask? Wang Lu looked at the master in front of him who did not have the demeanor of an expert, and then thought of the peerless heroism that disintegrated the Taoist heart of a Yuanying master not long ago. He couldn't help but sigh. "Master, you really hide your strength." His master snorted, took a sip of the crudely made tea and said, "Of course I can't casually show it to others. That's something that those infatuated girls of the Joyful clan would do. I'm a woman from a good family after all." "No, I'm referring to the duel just now. Master, you've misunderstood." The woman in white once again took a sip of tea, trying to cover up her embarrassment. "You mean that duel? In fact, it's not a big deal. He's just a waste Yuanying stage cultivator, so why make a fuss about it?" "Waste Yuanying stage cultivator?" Casually? Wang Wu said it lightly, but in fact, if Yuanying stage cultivators were really so worthless, they wouldn't be called Yuanying stage old monsters and treated with deep reverence. In fact, more than 90% of the cross-stage challenges in the immortal cultivation world ended in failure or even a crushing defeat. A higher level of cultivation often meant an all-round suppression. How could it be easy to win? What's more, no matter how unbearable Taoist Master Jifeng was, after all, a Yuanying stage cultivator from a famous sect. His foundation was much stronger than those cultivators from third-rate sects or loose cultivators. Therefore, Wang Lu's master's calm victory was so inconceivable. Although he had heard people say that his master seemed to have the reputation of being the #1 king pill in the immortal cultivation world, but even if the rumor was true, it was nothing more than the #1 king pill. There should be a deep gap between the Yuanying stage and the Yuanying stage. Oh, little Wang Lu, you've been deceived by the false common sense of the immortal cultivation world. Don't think of the commonly used stage division in the immortal cultivation world as a pagoda-shaped structure, one layer on top of the other. In fact, after the king pill stage there's no difference in the level of a cultivator, only the direction is different. The Yuanying stage is not necessarily better than the king pill stage, and the deity stage is not necessarily better than the Yuanying stage. If the cultivator's pursuit of the immortal cultivation world is a distant goal, then whether it's the king pill or the Yuanying stage, they're just different roads leading to the same destination. Master's words were sincere, but Wang Lu felt that this theory was absurd. According to what you said, if there's no difference between the king pill stage and the deity stage, then why do cultivators have to painstakingly pursue a breakthrough in the realm? After advancing to the king pill stage they could just peacefully cultivate. What's the point of going through so much trouble to break through the realm? Or are you saying that for the past tens of thousands of years, cultivators have been doing useless work? So many amazing geniuses, but none of them have discovered that there's no need to break through the realm. Staying at the king pill stage will allow one to become a true immortal one day? Wang Wu explained, the path of immortal cultivation is full of thorns. When people discovered that following the king pill stage, the Yuanying stage, the deity stage, and the Mahayana stage they could all become immortals. Who would be so bored to open up a heretical path? No matter how amazing a person is, in front of a mortal's path to the immortal realm, they're still insignificant and lowly. So, after so many years indeed, no one has discovered this truth. Ha, so many people haven't discovered it, only you have? Wang Wu nodded confidently. Yes, I even applied for a patent, but unfortunately it was rejected. Nonsense, it'd be strange if it wasn't rejected. In fact, my theory is indeed not perfect, but there's one thing I want you to remember. To measure a cultivator's strength, you don't see which path he's standing on, but how far he's walked on this path. And any realm, in fact, contains infinite possibilities. It just depends on whether you have the ability to explore it. Hearing this, Wang Lu had nothing to say. After all, he'd only been cultivating for a little more than 2 years. Whether it was theory or practical experience, he was far from being comparable to his master, let alone arguing with her. Not to mention, her king pill battle record against a Yuanying stage cultivator was right there, which was more powerful than any theory. However, after listening to his master, Wang Lu was very curious. How far had she walked on the path of the king pill? Master, how much strength did you use to defeat Jifeng? His master thought for a moment. At least 1 in 10,000. Isn't this F*king nonsense? If you don't want to say it, then forget it. Wang Lu was too lazy to entangle himself in this useless topic with his master, so he went straight to the point. Master, teach me the non-fei sword art. The previous battle with Taoist Master Jifeng for the other disciples of Spirit Sword sect was just a jaw-dropping drama. However, in the eyes of Wang Lu, who also cultivated the non-phase method, there were too many tricks. His master was able to use the king pill to break through the Yuanying stage, and the biggest contributor in that battle was the seemingly mediocre, but in fact the exquisite non-phase sword art. His master, with a bamboo sword, displayed the power of the king pill cultivator to the extreme. It was simply breathtaking. And according to his seventh martial uncle, after cultivating the ninth layer of the sword bone, the most important thing was, of course, to cultivate the non-phase heart sutra, which would speed up the accumulation of the surrounding spiritual energy and lay a solid foundation. However, on the other hand, he could also start to practice several fighting methods such as the non-phase sword art. However, for the newcomers of the low-level chi cultivating stage, the fighting method was not important, especially the pure defensive method of the non-phase method. According to the fifth elder's idea, the best thing to do was to be like the valley hero and focus on advancing to the high-level chi cultivating stage in 1 or 2 years, and then she could go to the sect leader to show off her painstaking efforts in teaching her disciple, and then swindle the bounty. In view of this, Wang Lu very directly put forward his application, lest his master taught him a force-feeding method, which would be bad for him. As a result, his master actually readily nodded and then, "Okay, which one do you want to learn?" Wang Lu was suddenly startled. "How many do you have?" "I don't dare to say too many, but I definitely have more than 20. Thinking of his master's 100% original and scrupulous and more than 100 versions of the non-phase heart method, Wang Lu could not help but feel powerless. "Can you help me get rid of a few wrong answers?" His master smiled. "That being the case, I'll recommend you 2 sets of non-phase sword art. However, the threshold for these 2 sets of non-phase sword art is very high. One requires the cultivator to have great perseverance, and the other requires great wisdom. I don't know if I choose the great wisdom." Wang Lu made a prompt decision, full of confidence. If he chose the great perseverance, he would have to cultivate for 100 years to reach the small success level, then he would have to cultivate for a fart. "Oh, you choose the great wisdom type, it's actually very suitable for your opportunistic style." After his master evaluated him maliciously, she said, "But this doesn't mean that perseverance can be abandoned. On the contrary, perhaps this road will be more difficult than great perseverance." "Because I haven't gone through it." Wang Lu suddenly spurted out his saliva. "You haven't practiced the sword art, yet you have the nerve to teach me?" His master confidently said, "Nonsense, who stipulates that the master must have practiced the kung fu when teaching the disciple? The Heavenly Sword Hall's male elders are now teaching the female successor disciples. Don't tell me that before teaching them how to chop a red dragon, they must first find a red dragon to practice?" Wang Lu was suddenly speechless. "Humph, young man, you still have no experience." It was rare for his disciple to choke to death, so his master was very satisfied. "Very well, I will teach you the second set of the 17th edition of the non-phase sword art. With your current cultivation base, as long as you can practice the first 3 layers, it would be difficult for cultivators below the foundation establishment stage to pose a threat to you. And if combined with the non-phase heart sutra, you can speed up your chi cultivating stage cultivation base, supporting your basic attributes. Even a middle-level foundation establishment stage cultivator would find it difficult to hurt you." "Oh, so cool. Isn't it cool? Otherwise, why do you think I can use the king pill to break through the Yuaning stage? For us, the non-phase peak cultivators, if you can't challenge someone of a higher level, then your cultivation base has failed. Well, without further ado, you have 3 months to practice the first 3 layers of the non-phase sword art and advance your cultivation base to the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage." "Wait a minute. Reach the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage in 3 months? Master, are you trying to force me to my death? Normally, it would take at least 1.5 to 2 years to reach the 7th level, right?" "Humph, how could a cultivator with a dignified void spirit root compare to those wretches? Rest assured, with your rich accumulation, it's easy for you to walk the road that would take others 1 or 2 years to walk in 3 months. Damn, where did my accumulation come from? This void spirit root is purely a drag. Moreover, now that the basic structure has been changed by your non-phase sword bone, my cultivation speed is only at the level of 2nd or 3rd rank spirit root, okay? In short, young man, don't complain and work hard. 3 months later, if you can't reach the 7th level of the chi cultivating stage and the 3rd layer of the non-phase sword art, hey, when the time comes, don't blame your master for not urging you." 3 months later. What's the matter? "I don't know any stellar diffraction technique. How could I know what will happen in 3 months? So, you can completely not believe every word I say." Chapter 73. I don't know the stellar diffraction technique, so how could I know what will happen in the future? Therefore, little Wang Lu, you can completely not believe every word I say. Wang Wu's shameless attitude of a dead pig not afraid of boiling water made her disciple Wang Lu helpless. From their 2 years of experience together, Wang Wu was really not a trustworthy person. The most typical example was 2 years ago when he applied for a long-term meal ticket to the Misty Peak cafeteria. At that time, she boasted that the Misty Peak cafeteria was the supreme example of the Western continent cuisine. When Wang Lu excitedly rushed into the cafeteria with the meal ticket, he was immediately cursed by the look up at the starry sky fish heads. However, to say that she was not trustworthy. Just a day ago, the 6 Heavenly Sword Hall elders endorsed her at the same time. Feng Yin Taoist masters, I believe her, was so domineering. In any case, regardless of whether Taoist master Jifeng believed it or not, they all believed it. Thinking to this, Wang Lu could only sigh in his heart, thinking, I'll believe her one more time. Then it was time for intense and fulfilling cultivation. According to Wang Wu's requirement, Wang Lu had to break through 3 stages in 3 months, all the way until he reached the 7th level of Qi cultivating stage. Among them, the most important one was naturally the non-phase method. For the vast majority of cultivators in the immortal cultivation world, the non-phase method, which taught the cultivators how to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy, transform it into magical power, and directly enhance the cultivation of the immortal cultivation stage, was usually called the core method, which was the foundation of all cultivation. The content of the core method was the most extensive and also the most difficult. Cultivators spent a lot of energy on the core method. As for the non-phase sword method, although his master also required it, it actually belonged to the minor details. However, when Wang Lu actually practiced it, he was surprised to find that the non-phase method was the most effortless. Because this cultivation method was simply too strange. He had been in the school for more than 2 years. Even though he had no luck with most of the skills in the Lingjian school because of his spiritual root, but even if he had not eaten pork, he would still have seen a pig run. The most important reason for the difficulty of cultivating the core skills was that there were too many unfathomable and indescribable contents in the skills of immortal cultivation that required the cultivators to comprehend on their own. Most of the time, how to breathe in and out spiritual energy, how to circulate it, and how to transform it into spiritual energy was just a feeling. The predecessors who invented the cultivation method tried their best to describe this feeling in words and passed it on to their descendants. However, this method of information transmission was inevitably prone to errors. Furthermore, cultivators had different physiques and opportunities. Even if they cultivated the same cultivation technique, they would have completely different experiences. It was very difficult to find a universal formula that could lead all cultivators on the right path. At this time, even if a master came to teach them, the cultivators would still feel at a loss, like a blind man touching an elephant. Every step on the path of cultivation would be difficult. Taking the Qi cultivating stage as an example, the most important step was to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy to nourish the inner mansion, to form the circulation of spiritual energy within the body, to transform the magical power, and then to evolve the inner mansion into the jade mansion, to create the node that connects the inside and outside. For the common core skills, there were too many steps that the cultivators needed to try bit by bit. For example, the speed of absorbing spiritual energy, the method to form the circulation, the scale, the structure of each person's inner mansion was different, so the location to form the circulation would also be different. Even if it was the simplest and most universal cultivation method, free and unfettered wander, there were still countless hazy and vague places, which made it difficult to clearly explain the correct cultivation method. However, the non-phase method could. How to use the golden liquid extracted from the 206 sword bones to form the circulation, where to gather the golden liquid in the inner mansion, how much strength to drive the energy, how to form the whirlpool at what speed, what diameter. The explanation of each step was so detailed that it could make one's hair stand on end. Moreover, it was completely tailor-made, so Wang Lu only needed to practice it step by step. There was no room for hesitation. Regarding this point, Wang Wu didn't take credit for it. Actually, it's not that difficult. Although your void spirit root is particularly troublesome when it comes to absorbing spiritual energy, it is, after all, the number 1 spirit root in the immortal cultivation world. In other aspects, it's also top-notch. Therefore, when designing the cultivation method, as long as you are set as an ideal cultivator, and then deduced according to the most ideal theory, it's just an armchair strategist. You don't even need to test it before you can directly practice it. Of course, this method is only suitable for you. If it's another cultivator, they would probably explode and die in less than half a day, haha. What the hell are you laughing at? You're a Frankenstein who uses your apprentice as a human experiment? In any case, as the core skill of the non-phase method, there was basically no difficulty. His cultivation speed was exceptionally astonishing. In just 10 days, Wang Lu had already constructed the simplest small circulation in his body and completed the 9th level of qi cultivating stage. If this continued, then within 3 months, advancing to the 7th level of qi cultivating stage would also be easy. The next step was the non-phase sword art. According to Wang Lu's choice, his master taught him a set of second form non-phase sword art. This set of sword art was indeed like what his master said, only those with great wisdom could practice it. Because the design idea of this sword art was to gather the essence of all the sword art in the world, omnipotent. At the same time, one must have insight into the flaws of all things, all-conquering. Just listening to this guiding idea, Wang Lu immediately associated it with all kinds of perpetual motion machines, water to oil and other such things. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that it was unreliable. Fortunately, his master quickly continued, "Of course, that belongs to the ideal state of the non-phase sword art. For you, it may seem illusory, but people who cultivate the immortal cultivation path always have a lofty ideal. As for how to combine it with reality, that's another matter." Wang Lu suddenly understood. It's to build the second form non-phase sword art with Wang Wu's characteristic. Why didn't you say so earlier? However, when his master really taught him the method to practice the first form non-phase sword art, Wang Lu felt that he was being cheated. The first form non-phase sword art is very simple. You just need to find 50 or 60 sets of second or third class sword art from the mortal world, practice them one by one and master them. Where am I going to find 50 or 60 sets of sword art from the mortal world? Well, this isn't it. While his master said, she pulled out a large pile of worn-out sword manuals from nowhere. These are the high-quality martial arts that I bought from the mortal world at a sky-high price. Practice them well, don't let down your master's painstaking efforts. Wang Lu's face was full of suspicion. Ignoring the dust on the pile of books, he reached out to look at them. Free Cloud Sword Art, Lying Corpse Sword Art, Yu Nu Sword Art. Damn, aren't these just beginner's sword arts? Do you think I don't understand the classification of martial arts in the mortal world? At least give me 2 sets of Winding Finger Soft Sword and Fallen Flower Divine Sword? He continued to look, and this time he found a piece of paper which read, Scripture Pavilion's products must be high quality, limited time discount, a stack of 10 taels. Wang Lu immediately looked up, but his master had already disappeared. Although he always felt that he was cheated by his master in the next half a month, Wang Lu still honestly practiced these dozens of beginner's sword arts one by one. It was reasonable to say that even if it was just a beginner's sword art, it would be difficult to achieve success without 3 to 5 years of practice. However, Wang Lu had been soaked in the changing muscle and washing marrow soup to become a rare martial arts genius, and he also had the foundation of non-phase sword bone. Thus, his cultivation speed was far from that of an ordinary person. 10 days later he was able to use these dozens of sword arts. And in these 10 days Wang Lu gradually realized his master's intention. Although these beginner's sword arts were easy to understand and their actual combat value was not high, they were the summary of the mortal world's martial arts world for hundreds of thousands of years. They were the most suitable for a newcomer to understand the sword theory and reach the next level in the way of the sword. Although Wang Lu had previously learned the soft cloud sword, his understanding was only at the technical level, and he did not comprehend the deeper content of the way of the sword. Through the practice of these dozens of sword arts with different characteristics, Wang Lu gradually figured out that there were some common principles among these sword arts. Although this feeling was still very vague according to his master, this was the first level of the non-phase sword art. In her own words, this level was more of a theoretical study, and it was still far from actual combat. Therefore, although Wang Lu had practiced the first level of the non-phase sword art, it was not as good as the soft cloud sword. This was probably why a full 6-star sword art was not as good as a full 4-star sword art. The following second level was exactly the same as the first level. It was still a theoretical discussion, and did not involve actual combat. It was just that the beginner's sword art became the middle-level sword art that was circulated in the mortal world's martial arts world, like the famous sword art of each sect. The only difference was that the wholesale price was increased from 10 taels of silver to 1,000 taels of silver. He didn't know what kind of god this scripture pavilion was, that they could even sell the middle-level sword art in bulk. The level of the sword art increased, and its variation and power also increased exponentially, but the difficulty of practicing it did not increase by much. After 10 days, dozens of middle-level sword arts were overcome by Wang Lu one by one, and he was very clear about them. Then, when Wang Lu confidently challenged the third level, the situation changed a lot. According to his master's overall plan, The third level would be the embryonic form of the non-phase sword art, and the initial ability to use it in actual combat, and this initial was the standard of the immortal cultivation world. If it was in the mortal world, the third level of the non-phase sword art could surpass any of the mortal world's top sword art. As for the method of practicing it, it's very simple. You have to master the hundreds of sword arts that you have learned before, deeply understand the truth, and then combine it with your own actual situation to create your own. Even if it's the embryonic form of the second level of the non-phase sword art, the third level would also be completed. Create my own sword art? Wang Lu simply couldn't believe it. Isn't it very democratic, very free, and very universal? Universal, your sister. Hurry up and give me a set of autocratic dictatorship like the non-phase method. As a result, his master sighed. Unfortunately, I'm not joking about this issue. Non-phase sword art and non-phase method are two different things. The first few levels of non-phase method are the foundation of the immortal cultivation world. In simple terms, it's the unity of man and nature. As long as the sky doesn't change and the people don't change, naturally, a set of fixed correct answer can be summed up to tell you how to practice it. However, the sword art is a method of facing the enemy, a method of actual combat with endless variations. How could there be a set of fixed routines? Therefore, you need to explore and comprehend it yourself, to find the path that suits you. Thinking back, your master also walked step by step like this. For you to have the guidance of a famous teacher, you are already many times luckier than your master. Therefore, brave young man, quickly find your own path. F***CK. My path is to trample your pretentious face under my feet. The cultivation of the third level of the non-phase sword art was very slow. From the time when his master set the 3-month deadline, more than a month had passed. The cultivation of the non-phase method had steadily progressed. Now, his cultivation base was already at the 8th rank, and the 7th rank was also within sight. In addition, the various mortal world sword arts required for the first 2 levels of the sword art had almost reached the master level. Unfortunately, there wasn't even a shadow of the 3rd level of the sword art. Originally, when it came to martial arts, Wang Lu had the best teacher, the lady boss of a certain inn. However, now that he urgently needed her help, the lady boss had mysteriously disappeared, and he couldn't find her. After inquiring about it in the Spirit Creek town, he found out that she actually went to the nearby village to purchase goods. Holy **T, your average daily turnover is more than 10,000 yuan, what kind of goods do you want to purchase? If you can sell it, then there's a ghost. On second thought, Wang Lu realized that it was probably because of his overeating in the inn, which used up too much of the stored food, which forced the lady boss to go out to purchase goods. He really reaped what he sowed. Without help, he could only rely on himself. However, creating his own sword art was easier said than done. Although in the past month, through continuous cultivation of the sword art, Wang Lu had a considerable understanding of the way of the sword, and the shadow of the sword was faintly left in his heart, but using this as the foundation to create a set of sword art that was suitable for himself, it was extremely difficult. Of course, with Wang Lu's talent and perception, if he really wanted to create it, it was not impossible. By tinkering with the existing materials, he could also integrate a set of new sword art that was far superior to the middle level of the mortal world sword art. However, according to his master, this self-created sword art would become the foundation of his practice for a long time in the future. So, what was the point of deceiving himself on this issue? Since he had the void spirit root, since he was a professional adventurer, since he had this and that special thing, then either he didn't do it or he did it to the best of his ability. According to his master, the second level of the non-phase sword art was a test of great wisdom. Then he would use his own supreme perception to break through this hurdle. Isn't it just 100 sets of mortal world sword art? Let me use my supreme deduction power to simulate and experiment them one by one in my mind, and finally come up with the result. Therefore, in the next few days, Wang Lu was like a lovelorn teenager, meditating on the way of the sword all day long, and then sighing and tossing and turning, unable to sleep. One day Wang Lu was absent-minded. Like a wandering spirit in the daytime, he staggered down the non-phase peak. Using the sect's shrinking array, he came to the small square of the misty peak and swayed left and right toward the cafeteria. Along the way, many of his senior brothers and senior sisters who knew him were scared by him. He didn't respond to their greetings, ignored them when they called his name, and even waved their hands in front of his eyes, but none of them could make his pair of vacant eyes focus. Some people thought that he was possessed by the devil and hurriedly went to find the sect's elder. As a result, Elder Lucien hurriedly flew over to take a look and scolded, Non-face Peak's idiot is trying to impress the crowd again. None of you care about him. Very well, since Elderly said so, then let's just ignore him. However, looking at the young red and white disciple with a dazed look rushing into the Misty Peak cafeteria, it was really unbearable. Several Spirit Sword sect disciples looked at Wang Lu with pity, and then looked at the new signboard hanging at the entrance of the Misty Peak cafeteria. Family reciprocation, sincere reward, brand new dish, please taste. They couldn't help but shed tears of sympathy. Chapter 74. Unknowingly he walked toward the Misty Peak cafeteria. Wang Lu didn't realize that there was a bottomless abyss in front of him. His whole mind was devoted to the deduction of his swordsmanship. In his mind, each and every one of the little people brandished their swords and sometimes fought with each other. As a bystander, Wang Lu could learn from them and extract valuable experience. Not long ago, Wang Lu also discovered that he actually had this kind of ability. Perhaps it was the non-phase sword bone, especially the Emperor bone, that effectively improved his IQ, or perhaps it was the non-phase method that absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy and initially condensed his primordial spirit. In short, since he had this ability, he should use it to his heart's content. Wasn't this how great wisdom came about? And when Wang Lu deduced the reclining corpse sword art against the free cloud sword art for the 15th time and was intoxicated by the new flaw of the free cloud sword art, suddenly his body was slapped by someone. With a violent shake, that mysterious realm was shattered. Damn, who is it? With a face full of anger, Wang Lu returned to the real world. He found himself sitting in the middle of the Misty Peak cafeteria. A petite but heroic blonde girl was staring at him with her green eyes. Excuse me, what do you need? Wang Lu looked around and found that he was the only guest in the cafeteria. Inwardly, he cursed, guessing that he had inadvertently broken into a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. The 4 forbidden areas of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the sect leader's bedroom, the pink house, the sword tomb, and the new Misty Peak cafeteria. This is really courting death. Wang Lu silently sang an elegy to himself, and then resolutely said, if you have something new here, bring it to me. In the cultivation of the sword, the most important thing was to have the indomitable momentum of a sword. Whether you are the 13 tycoons looking up at the starry sky or the 1,000,000 kings pulling out the sword in the stone, I, your father, will eat you today. Hearing Wang Lu's words, the little bit of unhappiness on the young chef's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced with a pleasantly surprised smile. Very good. Today I just launched a new dish inspired by my distant hometown. With the lake as the theme, it has a very memorable value. Damn it, I, your father, am not a Western continent person. Why do I need the commemorative value? Anyway, don't worry. The dish this time will definitely give you a pleasant surprise. The girl made the promise in an imposing manner. Then, without asking anything else, she quickly walked back to the kitchen to prepare the new lake-themed dish. A moment later, when Wang Lu subconsciously wanted to enter the meditation to deduce the sword art, the blonde girl came out of the meditation room. In her hand was a porcelain pot that seemed very large compared to her size. She then firmly placed it on the table with a proud look on her face. Have a taste, this is my masterpiece. Wang Lu trembled with fear as he looked at the dark green soup in the huge porcelain pot. Regardless of the strange smell or the occasional bubbles, just the suspicious meatball floating in the middle of the soup was enough to make people unable to let go of it no matter what. Wang Lu cautiously asked, may I ask if your dish, is it a Loch Ness monster? The girl frowned. No, it's a lake elf. Don't you think the appearance of this elf is a bit strange? The girl continued to frown. Is it? You'd better eat it quickly or it won't taste good when it gets cold. No, I'm sure this thing should be frozen to absolute zero for it to be the most suitable. However, when Wang Lu put a spoonful of the soup into his mouth with the courage to overcome all obstacles, he was surprised to find that it didn't seem that bad. Although it was far from delicious and it couldn't be compared to a certain girl who was good at cooking at the Rue Family Inn, but, compared to the stargazy pie and other dishes that had been deceiving him for years, it had made great progress. After repeatedly confirming that his taste buds did not betray his master, Wang Lu very straightforwardly gave her a thumbs up. The girl's smile bloomed in a flash, almost like the blooming of spring flowers, completely covering the horror of the dark green soup on the table. Thank you for your appreciation. I will continue to work hard and live up to the expectations of the customers. Then she returned to the kitchen in high spirits to make other dishes. Wang Lu drank a few spoonfuls of the lake elf, but because his taste buds weren't that strong, he quickly became engrossed in the deductions of swordsmanship. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu, who had finished his deductions, turned his attention back to reality, only to find the green-eyed girl standing in front of him with a disappointed expression. There were a few dishes on the table, but they had all gone cold without exception. And although Wang Lu held a spoon and chopsticks in his hands, he hadn't touched them at all. As expected, it still doesn't work? The girl sighed very sadly, quietly admitting her failure. For a proud person like her, this kind of feeling was really painful and indescribable. Looking at the girl's disappointment and pain, Wang Lu thought for a moment, feeling as if he had inadvertently become a demon who destroyed a flower and played with a girl's heart. According to the rules of the sect, it seemed that he had violated the precept of lust. Although this was really an unintentional mistake, professional adventurers should dare to take responsibility for their actions. Since I played with your heart, I will take responsibility for it to the end. Actually, I was just distracted just now. The girl nodded firmly. I can understand. Brilliant warriors will use distraction to relieve pain, and it is my fault that I brought you so much pain. I really don't have the talent. Wait, girl, you misunderstood. Actually, it's like this. Wang Lu simply told her about his current failure in swordsmanship, and the problem of being in a trance all day. This was easier to win people's trust. But after saying this, he found that the girl was looking at him with great surprise. You know swordsmanship? Damn, Wang Lu was immediately unhappy. This question seemed to be lamenting. Even pigs can climb trees? In any case, you are a true disciple of a swordsmanship sect. If you don't know swordsmanship, should I show you the nine-toothed harrow? Although the aptitude of the void spirit root is a bit of a pain in the ass, there is no need to look down on people like this. Realizing that she had misspoken, the girl covered her mouth and then explained, No, I'm just surprised. Since you know swordsmanship, why use such an immature method to cultivate your swordsmanship? Wang Lu said, How is it immature? Using superior intelligence to deduce swordsmanship, increasing efficiency and reducing cost, what's wrong with that? The girl thought for a moment and then somewhat stiffly replied, Swordsmanship is not thought of but used. Wang Lu sighed. My swordsmanship is different, it needs great wisdom to practice. The girl pondered for a long time this time, until Wang Lu was about to get up to pay the bill. She said, I remember even in the language of Nine Regions people, wisdom and intelligence are two completely different words. Wang Lu was stunned when he heard this. Intelligence, wisdom, there seemed to be a flash of light in the dark. The girl slightly frowned and continued, Intelligence is mostly innate, while wisdom is mostly acquired experience. Since it needs great wisdom to cultivate, it should rely more on experience, in other words, actual combat experience. How can you blindly think about it? Well said, it's really enlightening. Upon hearing this, the light in Wang Lu's mind had already spread into the sunlight, and all the haze had vanished. It was indeed as the girl said. Unfortunately, he had been anxious for so many days that he didn't see through it. Swordsmanship had to be practiced, and he had already accumulated enough theoretical foundation after many days of deduction. The only thing he lacked was actual combat experience. It was just that, the practice of swordsmanship obviously couldn't be done behind closed doors. It was best to have someone who could guide him. He didn't need to be very strong, but at the very least he had to be proficient in the way of the sword. He had practiced more than 100 swordsmanship, but he still couldn't enter the way, so the other party must have mastered more swordsmanship than that, right? Although many of the senior brothers and sisters in the sect had amazing strength, profound cultivation, and especially sharp swordsmanship, their attainments in the way of the sword might not be very high. Swordsmanship and the way of the sword were two different things. Normally, the best person to guide him would undoubtedly be the lady boss, but now she wasn't here. While thinking, he saw a pair of green eyes out of the corner of his eye, and an idea flashed in Wang Lu's mind. Didn't he have a ready-made one? Although he hadn't seen this girl fight before and he didn't know her depth, just now she had seen through the mysteries of the way of the sword and enlightened him. If she wasn't an expert, then who was? Some loser who couldn't even get out of bed in the afternoon and didn't even have 2 sets of clothes to change into? You want me to help you practice swordsmanship? The girl chef who was cleaning the dishes looked at Wang Lu in surprise. She didn't expect him to make such a request. After a moment of hesitation, the girl shook her head. I'm just a chef, I can't help you with anything. How could Wang Lu believe this? He waved the long-term meal ticket in his hand. For the sake of an old customer, please do me a favor. It's a sincere offer. Frightened by the rare long-term meal ticket, the girl stammered, but Wang Lu couldn't be bothered to say more. He directly pulled out the purple soft sword from his waist and stabbed at the girl's shoulder. The other party didn't expect Wang Lu to make a move just like that. She was really surprised, especially with the bowl and chopsticks in her hand, it was inconvenient for her to dodge. But the next moment, the girl held the bowl and chopstick steadily with one hand, and with the other she held a chopstick. She lightly touched the tip of Wang Lu's soft sword and blocked it. When the sword didn't hit, Wang Lu took advantage of the situation to withdraw the soft sword, but he was amazed in his heart. As expected of a great hidden expert, the sword he used just now was not the soft cloud sword technique, but the heaven and earth sword techniques. One sword determines the heaven and earth. It was full of power. With his chi cultivating stage 8 cultivation, even a first-rate martial artist wouldn't be able to block it. But he didn't expect that the golden-haired girl only used a chopstick to easily block the sword. If this wasn't an expert, then who was? So, without waiting for the girl to put down the bowl and chopsticks, Wang Lu very straightforwardly knelt on the ground. "Master, please accept this disciple's bow." Whoosh! The dishes and bowls fell to the ground. Chapter 75. Master, please accept this disciple's kowtow. Wang Lu successfully used this trick to cause a heavy loss of several tableware to the Misty Peak cafeteria, which made the young chef somewhat lost her wits. How can this be? I just came to Lingjian school as a guest to learn. How can I overstep my authority and become your master? Moreover, don't you 9 regions people attach the most importance to the master's inheritance? Wouldn't this damage the dignity of a master? Wang Lu smiled and said, "My master doesn't even have a personality, how could she have dignity? Don't worry, no harm." But the young girl obviously couldn't accept it. Wang Lu didn't say much. He bent down and was about to kowtow again. Okay, I understand. If it's just a swordsmanship practice, I have no problem. But I'm not your master and you're not my disciple. Wang Lu smiled. Okay. Thus, that afternoon, Wang Lu experienced the fierceness of this Western continent girl. In the Misty Peak cafeteria, she had only been in Lingjian school for 4 years. During this period, she rarely went out and never showed her ability to outsiders. Therefore, even Wang Lu didn't expect that this girl was actually so powerful. At the Misty Peak's training field, Wang Lu, armed with the purple soft sword, faced the wooden sword-wielding girl, put out all of his skills. Using the soft cloud sword and winding step as the foundation, he blended all of his 1 month's experience in swordsmanship, combined with the 9th layer of the non-phase sword bone, as well as the 8th level chi cultivating stage core method. When he went all out in defense, Wang Lu was confident that even a low-level foundation establishment cultivator would have a big headache. However, in the face of such a powerful defense of Wang Lu, the blonde girl only used 3 sword strikes to disintegrate it. The first sword strike was straight at the top of Wang Lu's head. The wooden sword was as heavy as Mount Tai, which broke a hole in Wang Lu's defense on the spot. The second strike was still aimed straight at his head. The momentum of Wang Lu's sword was scattered, and his chi and blood were in turmoil. The third strike was aimed straight at his head, and the purple myrtle flexible sword flew out of his hand, causing Wang Lu's final struggle to end in failure. After 3 strikes, Wang Lu was completely convinced. The girl did not rely on pure brute force to win. Her strength was at most equal to Wang Lu's, but she was able to win with 3 strikes. These 3 strikes seemed simple, but who knew how many tricks were hidden in the subtleties? At the same time, Wang Lu could see the uniqueness of the girl's swordsmanship from these 3 strikes. According to the standard of 9 regions, this girl was undoubtedly a very different kind of swordsman. Her swordsmanship did not have a well-formed routine. Just now, those 3 sword moves were just like a heavenly steed flying in the sky, but each sword strike fell on the vital point. Every movement of her whole body was exquisite and peerless. In a more vulgar way, it could be said that no move was better than having a move. However, according to the lady boss's theory, how could there be any swordsmanship in the world that could surpass a move without a move? If one couldn't even practice the basic skill, then one might as well light a firecracker under one's butt. It was not that there was no swordsman who could surpass a move without a move, but the premise was that his swordsmanship had reached perfection. The swordsmanship of the Western continent was very different from that of the 9 regions. There were not too many schools of swordsmanship, but after all, there was a quite mature swordsmanship system. Not long ago the lady boss had nothing to do, so she explained the mystery of it to Wang Lu and personally demonstrated it. However, the blonde girl's swordsmanship was also completely different from those mature systems. Quoting the lady boss's point of view again. In this world, if one wanted to enter the realm of no move was better than having a move without practicing swordsmanship, then there was only one way. A veteran of hundreds of battles. Even the lady boss did not want to be the enemy of those who reached the peak through this road. In other words, this blonde cook was at least on the same level as the lady boss. Of course, this could also be seen from her breasts. All in all, with such a great expert around, there was no need to worry about the cultivation of swordsmanship. Just now he was defeated in 3 moves, but after he closed his eyes to reflect on the 3 moves, he felt that he had gained a lot. Many conclusions that needed to be deduced countless times in his mind were naturally comprehended now. Again? The girl smiled faintly and gripped her wooden sword tightly again. Then she swung it down again. This time Wang Lu was still defeated in 3 strikes. However, on the 3rd strike the girl didn't aim for his head. Instead she aimed for his chest. After 3 strikes, the young girl nodded her head in satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. Your comprehension is really good. With a disciple like you? Halfway through her words, she realized that she had made a slip of the tongue and immediately shut her mouth. Unfortunately, it was too late. Wang Lu suddenly jumped up. Haha, you finally admit that I'm your disciple. The girl was flabbergasted. I didn't. Haha, you obviously have it. What's there to be shy about? I'm just taking in a disciple, not asking you to get married. You should just obediently obey me. Umph. The girl didn't say anything else. She raised her wooden sword and swung it down. However, this time she didn't limit her strength. With 1 strike, she knocked away Wang Lu's purple soft sword. Humph, how can a loser who can't even take 1 strike be qualified to be my disciple? Damn, you're just acting shamelessly, okay? You talk too much. She swung her sword again. The wind from the sword was so sharp that Wang Lu couldn't say anything. For the next month, Wang Lu began the harsh cultivation of swordsmanship under this unjustifiable master-disciple relationship. The word harsh was not an exaggeration. The golden-haired girl wasn't a kind teacher. It could even be said that she didn't know how to teach her disciple. Her foundation in swordsmanship was excellent and she had received very orthodox training. However, what really allowed her to reach the peak of swordsmanship was the accumulation of thousands of battles. Therefore, for her, the cultivation of swordsmanship was nothing more than actual combat. Therefore, the method she taught her swordsmanship was only 1 move, to let Wang Lu remember it with his body. Simply put, it was to beat Wang Lu in every possible way so that the other party would grow in pain. As for Wang Lu, to be honest, he wasn't afraid of pain. Although every time he was hit by the wooden sword, he would wonder which old dog he had cultivated his 9th layer non-phase sword bone. Obviously, even a low-rank level 3 monster couldn't break his defense, so why was it that every time he was stabbed by the golden-haired girl's wooden sword, he would feel a heart-wrenching pain? However, Wang Lu actually didn't mind the pain on his body. Because every time he felt pain, it meant that his swordsmanship had made great progress. The golden-haired girl was indeed not a qualified teacher, but Wang Lu was a superb student. The only problem was that, in the Misty Peaks martial arts practice field, he had been beaten by a golden-haired girl for a month in a row, which made him lose a lot of face. Fortunately, Wang Lu was a disciple of the non-phase peak, so he didn't care much about face. Although in the beginning he was still criticized by the Misty Peaks inner court disciples, but later on, several Foundation establishment disciples who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth came to challenge the golden-haired girl and were beaten by her with 1 sword strike. After that, there were no more nosy people. 1 month passed by quickly. On this day Wang Lu performed exceptionally. The purple soft sword was shaken by him like a long whip, soft and flexible. The golden-haired girl attacked 10 times in a row, and each sword strike had the power to split a mountain, but she couldn't break through Wang Lu's sword defense. Although in the end, Wang Lu found it difficult to continue, the girl nodded with satisfaction, retreated a few steps and no longer attacked. Amazing, in just 1 month you have progressed to this level, your talent is really amazing. After Wang Lu blocked the 10 sword strikes, his whole body relaxed and he took a long breath. This 3 feet sword defense can barely be considered as the initial stage. The golden-haired girl nodded. With your current swordsmanship, it is almost impossible for ordinary people to break your sword defense. However, this swordsmanship is only suitable for the duel between martial artists. According to the standard of your immortal path, it can only be regarded as the entry level. It's good enough to be able to enter the entry level. In the future I will slowly enrich and perfect it. At least I have built a reliable framework. The non-phase sword art was undoubtedly broad and profound. When practiced to the realm of his master Wang Wu, a bamboo sword could resist all kinds of spells of a Taoist master of Yuanying stage outside the sword defense. That was truly the realm of one sword breaking 10,000 methods. Now Wang Lu had only cultivated for 2 months, so naturally he could not break 10,000 methods. However, the road was walked step by step. Now that he had reached the 3rd layer, at least in the mortal world, he could barely be regarded as one sword breaking 10,000 methods. For a month, although the golden-haired girl only used a wooden sword to fight with him, the wooden sword in her hand gave birth to endless changes. Sometimes it was as heavy as a heavy hammer or a giant axe, and sometimes it was as light as a silver chain or a golden bell. When Wang Lu fought with her, it was as if he was fighting against thousands of experts, gaining many precious experiences. This 3-feet sword defense was also initially formed under the continuous stimulation. Indeed, from the current situation, it was only at the mortal world level. Under the 3-feet sword defense it could block 18 kinds of weapons, but it might not be able to block a fireball from a 9th-level chi cultivating stage cultivator. But as a basic framework this was already good enough. With just a mere 3rd layer he could not expect too much. Not to mention, if he really encountered a 9th-level chi cultivating stage fireball, why would he need to use pure swordsmanship to block it? Was the 9th layer sword bone and the 7th grade chi cultivating stage just for show? When the time came he could reach out and extinguish the fireball without the slightest bit of trouble. In short, his master's task could be considered to have been successfully completed 10 days earlier than expected. It could be seen that he was indeed worthy to be a void spirit root cultivator. He was born to create miracles and set records. With the completion of the task, Wang Lu could finally loosen up his tense heart for the past month. Therefore he finally could not hold back. He looked at the golden-haired girl and asked her a question that he had wanted to ask for a long time. "Miss, what is your surname?" The golden-haired girl was dumbfounded. The wooden sword in her hand fell to the ground with a clatter. "So you don't know my name?" The girl sighed. She felt that in this 1 month being a cheap master was a bit of a loss. And as Wang Lu's disciple, he was indeed a bit heartless. As she said in the beginning, she didn't come to Spirit Sword Mountain to be a master. It's just that this Wang Lu was indeed to her liking. Moreover, his talent in swordsmanship was too good, so she couldn't help but feel itchy. Thus, half as a sparring partner and half as a master she decided to teach him. Wang Lu also felt that this matter seemed a bit unreasonable. Looking at the girl's brilliant blonde hair, he tentatively said, Master Jean, Master Jean?" The girl felt that her vision turned black. It was quite similar to the time when she tasted her own dishes a few years ago. "Just call me Aya." "Oh, hello Aya." After a period of awkward run-in, the two were finally able to carry out a normal exchange. What kind of exchange? It was nothing more than life experience and the like. Wang Lu had long wanted to ask, but it was inconvenient for him to open his mouth. However, it was useless to ask because Aya didn't intend to tell him those personal secrets. She simply answered the question. "Aya, you have such a brilliant skill, you should be a famous big shot in the Western continent. Why did you come here to be a chef? To promote the Western continent culture and strengthen the food exchange?" Aya said, "I didn't come here specifically to be a chef. It's just that there is something I need in 9 regions, so I have to come." "What is it? Elixir of immortality?" "More or less." I looked a bit sad. She shook her head and didn't say much. "In short, the elders of Lingjian School have helped me a lot. They collected a lot of precious resources that I couldn't collect with my own strength. And I have nothing to repay them with, so I can only do what I can." Wang Lu found it hard to understand. Your so-called what you can do is to use your amazing skill to destroy the taste buds of Spirit Sword Sect's disciples? However, before he could ask more, a heavy and loud bell directly blasted in Wang Lu's mind. What the hell? Wang Lu jumped 3 feet high. This was the bell that gathered all the disciples of Lingjian School. Moreover, it rang 3 times in a row, which belonged to the relatively urgent level. Usually, it was a sign that the leader of the sect, Feng Yin Taoist Master, was going to come forward and make a speech. This summoning bell was only effective for the disciples of Spirit Sword Sect. Although Aya was a distinguished guest of the sect, she couldn't hear it. Seeing that Wang Lu's expression was strange, she asked, "What's wrong?" Wang Lu waved his hand. "It's nothing, someone just rang the bell of the sect leader." After thinking about it, he felt that he was somewhat unwilling to be interrupted by the bell. Therefore he clenched his teeth. "I'm hungry, let's go to the cafeteria to eat something and then go to the meeting." Aya's eyes lit up. "Okay." Chapter 76. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Wang Lu set off from the misty peak. When he arrived at the 4 divisions peak, there was already a sea of people. Of course, such a description was not accurate. In the entire Spirit Sword sect, including all the inner and outer court disciples, as well as the elders who were cultivating in seclusion on the mountain, and even the handymen of the Carefree Peak, it was hard to say whether they could come up with 1,000 people. However, as the gathering place, the square of the 4 divisions peak was indeed a bit small. When hundreds of people gathered, it seemed to be very crowded. Of course, no matter how crowded it was, just by virtue of his red and white robe, he had a foothold in the square. Sure enough, when Wang Lu, while shouting sorry, forced his way through the crowd and came to the front of the square, there was already a row of seats neatly stacked there. Those were the seats for the true disciples of the Lingjian school. However, as usual, although there were 4 seats in that row, there was only one person sitting there. A young girl in a colorful dress was greeting him with a bright smile. She was the true disciple of the 4th elder, nicknamed Little Lu Li. Her real name was unknown. She entered the sect a few years earlier than him, but now her cultivation was close to the foundation-building realm. It was not that she could not enter the foundation-building realm, but the 4th elder Zhou Ming deliberately suppressed her cultivation, wanting her to cultivate the brilliant sword heart before entering the foundation-building realm. The so-called brilliant sword heart, although Wang Lu did not understand it, he felt that it was amazing. In short, this true disciple was different from him, who was slightly inferior. She was a real elite of the sect. Unfortunately, after entering the sect for more than 2 years, the two of them did not have much interaction. They only occasionally met at the gate and nodded to each other. In addition to Little Lu Li, there were 2 other true disciples in the sect. Unfortunately, after entering the sect for more than 2 years, he had not seen either of them. It was said that the oldest one was the disciple of the 3rd elder Fang He. He traveled outside all year round and never wanted to return to the sect. The other one was the disciple of Feng Yin Taoist master, who entered the mountain almost at the same time as Little Lu Li. However, she had been in closed-door training all year round, like a tuberculosis ghost who had never seen the light of day all year round. She had only occasionally heard from her junior brothers and sisters that her talent was so strong that it was hard to find anyone in the entire 9 regions who could match her, and her cultivation base was even higher than Little Lu Ling. Looking at the situation today, the other 2 successor disciples probably wouldn't be able to come. Wang Lu didn't care. He casually sat down in his seat, picked up the teacup on the small table and took a sip, waiting for the arrival of the sect leader. Just as he sat down, he heard an old voice coming from the front. "Very good, everyone is here. Let's start the meeting." Looking up, the Heavenly Sword Hall elders were already sitting cross-legged in the air in front of the square. Wang Lu almost spat out the tea in his mouth. Damn it, the entire sect was waiting for me? Aren't you being too unprofessional as a sect leader? As a leader, you should always come later. At least wait for the rest of the soldiers to arrive before you come, right? If you come so early, how are we supposed to behave? Fortunately, except for Wang Lu, the others didn't care too much about this problem. After waiting for a while, Feng Yin Taoist master went straight to the point. Today I have gathered everyone here because there is an important task to be arranged. It's about the cultivation of the disciples of the sect. Therefore, Elder Lu Xian will explain the specific situation to everyone. Then, sitting on the left side of Feng Yin, the elder of Lingjian school said, "Notice about the new disciples going out for experiential learning. In order to further strengthen the talent team building of Lingjian school and comprehensively improve the comprehensive strength of the disciples, the sect plans to carry out the work of experiential learning for the new disciples in the near future. The related plan has been studied and approved by the Heavenly Sword Hall elders. Now the notice is as follows." Hearing this opening, Wang Lu couldn't help but spit out the tea in his mouth. What's with this strange style of writing? It's like déjà vu? Seeing the strong doubt in Wang Lu's eyes, a foreign elder sitting in the air very considerately explained to Wang Lu through telepathy, "In recent years, this is the movement of writing in the vernacular within the Wanxian League. Don't you know? Speaking of which, you really haven't participated in this kind of plenary meeting before. In short, it's to get rid of those flashy writing styles and vigorously promote the vernacular. Especially regarding the ancient books of techniques, it's important to make the vernacular easy to understand and accurately describe the advantages, so that it's convenient for the cultivation of the new generation of cultivators and so on. As one of the top 5 in the Wanxian League, Lingjian School has to be a good example. Therefore, since a few years ago, this kind of official document has been written in the vernacular." Well, there was no need for Marshal Uncle Guanhai to say anything more. Wang Lu had already deeply understood the profound connotation and importance of this movement. In short, the Wanxian League has been peaceful for thousands of years, and it's so uncomfortable that it has to be tossed around. Not long after, Elder Lu Xian finished reading the contents of the notice, and the disciples in the square had already been whispering to each other, showing their excitement. Even Wang Lu, who didn't care about the vernacular movement, fell into deep thought. The plan of the Heavenly Sword Hall elder to go out and gain experience, in simple terms, was to let the disciples below the foundation establishment stage go out and wander, using practical experience to enhance their experience and consolidate their cultivation. The scope of the experiential learning was within the Blue River Province. This was not unexpected. Because the Blue River Province was the tacit sphere of influence of Lingjian School, even though the sect had always been lax in management. Outside the Blue River Province, no matter where they went, they would enter the territory of other sections. Then all kinds of troubles would arise which would be intolerable. As for the content of the experiential learning, it was not something that could be casually played outside the mountain. The second elder Lu Xian clearly arranged a task. Each disciple must write a report of more than 5,000 words based on the experience of the experiential learning. The quality of the report would directly affect the sect's score. High quality didn't need to be mentioned, but if the quality was too poor, there was no upper limit to the deduction of points. As for the theme of the report, although the sect didn't strictly limit it, it gave a reference suggestion on the relationship between the immortal world and the mortal world. This topic was very big, but it was also very good. The 9 regions was vast and boundless, but in the end, in addition to the immortal cultivation world, there was only the mortal world, and the mortal world accounted for the majority of the 9 regions. The cultivators seemed to be aloof and above the mortal world, but if they really left the mortal world, the immortal cultivation world would be like a tree without roots. It was just that, there were not many cultivators who could really understand the relationship between the two worlds. The reason why such a huge problem was given to a group of young boys and girls who had just entered the sect was that their cultivation time was still too short, their mortal heart was still unsettled, and their cultivation level was not high enough. If they wanted to be ethereal and transcend the mortal world, their ability was not enough. With such conditions, going down the mountain for experiential learning would be an exceptionally valuable experience. Therefore, the time of the experiential learning was set to be very long. 1 year. However, for Wang Lu, these problems were not the key. The key was that with this activity he could finally go down the mountain legitimately and could finally go home and have a look. In fact, when the Heavenly Policy Hall designed the plan, they deliberately included this point in the scope of consideration. Letting them go down the mountain to study the relationship between the immortal world and the mortal world was actually to let them take this opportunity to cut off their mortal ties. He had no other choice. Immortals and mortals walk different paths. The saying was not a joke. The main difference between cultivators and mortals was not their strength, but their lifespan. Even if they were only successful in the foundation establishment stage, the lifespan of a cultivator would be close to 200 years, a Shudan stage cultivator would have 300 years, and a Taoist Master King Pill would have 400 years of lifespan. These were just the bottom line. And the disciples cultivated by an ancient sect like the Lingjian school had a solid foundation, comprehensive quality, and their lifespan was several times longer than the average cultivator. Now, many of these disciples in the qi refining stage had an innate lifespan of more than 150 years. In this case, there was an unavoidable problem. It was the parting of life and death with their relatives and friends in the mortal world. This experiential learning was actually a chance for the disciples to say goodbye to their relatives in the mortal world. Unfortunately, due to various conditions, it could only benefit the disciples born in the Blue River region. After the plan was announced, most of the disciples were talking about this matter. Well, this is the plan. You will leave at the beginning of next month. There is less than a month's time, so you should prepare well. Especially those who have entered the sect for the shortest time, you should speed up your cultivation. The world under the mountain is not as simple and comfortable as it is on the mountain. After explaining some simple matters to pay attention to, Feng Yin Taoist Master announced the end of the meeting. The clamor of the disciples suddenly swelled. Some were in high spirits while some were in low spirits. Wang Lu did not have too much of a reaction. He just felt that it was not bad to have a chance to return home in glory. As for that report, haha, when was a professional adventurer afraid of writing a report? Not to mention a year of experiential learning. Even if he was asked to write now, he could easily make a report with rich content to fool people. Therefore, when he thought of the small mountain village in the northern corner of the Dog-Ear Mountain in the Marquis County of the Great Ming Country in the Eastern Road Prefecture of the Blue River region, Wang Lu's heart gradually became hot. He was too lazy to think about cutting off his worldly ties and so on. As long as he knew that he was going home soon, that was enough. After the meeting, Wang Lu returned to the Non-Phase Peak's shack. His master was sitting in the hall, drinking alone. She was still drinking several hundred spirit stones worth of spirit wine, looking very carefree and happy. Normally, Wang Lu would have already ridiculed her. However, today he was in a good mood, so he was too lazy to argue with her. Seeing Wang Lu enter the room, his master softly exclaimed, Yo, not bad, you actually succeeded in your swordsmanship? Wang Lu was taken aback. You can see that? Humph, the swordsman's swordsmanship is different, so their temperament is also different. I can see the change in your temperament to know your cultivation. How could Wang Lu believe this kind of nonsense? He sneered. Tell me the truth. Wang Wu confidently said, actually, when you and Aya were having a sword fight, I happened to pass by. Sich asterisk T, then why are you bragging? Forget it, in short, I have overfulfilled your task. Now, can I go on a killing spree? Overfulfilled my ass, going on a killing spree? You've just completed the 3rd layer of non-phase sword art and you're already so cocky? Wang Wu was simply resentful. Didn't you hear what that idiot sect leader said? You little bastards are going to go down the mountain for experiential learning. Do you really think this is fun? Do you really think you can run amok in the 9 regions with your insignificant cultivation? Wang Lu immediately put on an ashamed and remorseful face. Master's lesson is really right, your words are really enlightening. I really shouldn't be complacent because of a little bit of insignificant progress and forget that the immortal path is slow and endless. 9 regions is so big that there is always a sky beyond the sky. These heartfelt words made his master's hair stand on end, and the slightly tipsy feeling that she had just brewed disappeared without a trace. Naturally, the precious immortal wine that she drank to nourish her chi was tantamount to feeding a dog. You. What's wrong with you? Wang Lu's face changed again. Master, this disciple of yours is so weak, shouldn't you give me some money to support me, haha? Where can I find money for you? Heavy metal is more like it. Wang Lu bluntly said, some time ago, you've taken all of that stupid donkey Jifeng's belongings, don't tell me you've sold them all. Ridiculous. Wang Wu of course was not penniless. With her wealth, she could even afford to drink a few hundred spirit stones worth of wine. However, she still had a ridiculing expression on her face as she looked up at Wang Lu contemptuously. Wang Lu's face changed again. He threw himself to his knees and hugged his master's thigh. Local tyrant, let's be friends, okay? Let go. Chapter 77. The 5th elder of the Lingjian school hadn't had this kind of treatment for many years. She had always been the one hugging others and then being abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. In the past, she seized countless magical tools, magical treasures, elixirs from Taoist Master Jifeng. Indeed, she didn't sell them all. In fact, although Taoist Master Jifeng wasn't rich, a Yuanying stage cultivator's net worth in the 9 regions could not be underestimated. It was not that easy to cash them all in a short period of time. Secondly, very well, since you're so humble and even lost your dignity to beg me, I'll reluctantly support you. Who told you to have poor aptitude, slow perception and ugly face? While ridiculing him, the 5th elder took out a small sword from her mustard seed bag and threw it to her disciple. What is this? Wang Lu asked while twirling the toothpick-like thin sword between his fingers. His master sneered. It's only been 2 months and you already forgot? After practicing with that barbarian female swordsman for a long time, your brain power really shriveled, little Wang Lu. Wang Lu attentively looked at it and felt that this small sword was a bit familiar. Before long, he exclaimed, what a small sword of Mount Kuan? Yes, it's the sword of Mount Kuan. Otherwise, is it really a toothpick? His master shook his head and explained seriously, this thing has no value to me, but it just so happens that you don't have a suitable weapon on hand, so you can make do with it. You should throw away that purple myrtle flexible sword, the weapons of the mortal world are already too far apart from your strength. However, this sword of Mount Kuan is an 8th rank spiritual treasure. Let alone riding the sword, you're just a chi refining stage cultivator, you're not even worthy to carry the sword spirit's shoes. And here, there's no sect leader's golden seal that can make you forcibly exert the power of the spiritual treasure. Therefore I helped you seal it. There are 9 layers of seals in total, which will naturally be unlocked as your cultivation base improves. With your current cultivation base, you can't even unlock the 1st layer of the seal. However, it doesn't matter if you can't unlock it. Spiritual treasure is, after all, spiritual treasure. Its material is far from that of ordinary magical tools. At least, with your level, you don't have to worry about breaking it. In addition, there's one important thing that you must pay attention to. With that, his master reached out to recall the sealed sword of Mount Kuan and gently flicked it with her finger, which emitted a crisp echo. The sword spirit of the sword of Mount Kuan is still here. Wang Lu frowned. This means? This means that before you officially become the owner of this sword, you must make a choice. Do you want to keep this sword spirit? What's the difference? His master smiled and said, of course there is. This sword of Mount Kuan wasn't refined by Taoist master Jifeng himself, but by a master refiner of Xingjing sect 1200 years ago. Do you know what this means? Wang Lu thought for a moment. This sword is just a piece of trash with an outdated design concept? Boss. The needle-like sword trembled violently, as if expressing its strong indignation. His master reached out to suppress the vibration of the spiritual treasure, and then she was extremely surprised. I say, you, the top student of Spirit Sword sect, haven't you ever taken a basic refining course? Wang Lu confidently said, the non-face peak is so poor, where would they get the money for me to learn refining? Well, to put it simply, there's an unwritten rule in the immortal cultivation world. The older the spiritual treasure, the higher its value. For example, the sword of Mount Kuan is 1,000 years old spiritual treasure. Although its basic level is only the 8th rank, its actual value is much higher than that. That idiot Jifeng's cultivation is insufficient, and his heart of Tao is shallow, so he could only barely display the 7th rank's power. In fact, it should be far more than that. Do you know why? Wang Lu, who has never taken a refining course, told the truth. I don't know. Oh, actually, the key is the sword spirit. The older the sword spirit, the richer its experience. And experience is, in many cases, a priceless treasure. A sword spirit that has experienced the vicissitudes of life can't be compared to a young and tender sword spirit. Well, to put it simply, Wang Lu said with a smile, I understand it's like carrying an old grandpa with you. Yes, that's the reason. In addition to the various wonderful uses it can play in a fight. For example, a flying sword, this kind of thing that cultivators carry with them, because it has been accompanying the cultivator for a long time, it is not unfamiliar with many things in immortal cultivation. If you encounter a problem, you can ask it at any time and you can use it as a half-teacher. Isn't it very convenient? After saying that, Wang Wu's tone changed. But then again, there are advantages and disadvantages. The more powerful the sword spirit, the more independent it is. Especially the sword of Mount Kuan, which has existed for thousands of years, a common king pill cultivator may not necessarily be able to suppress it. Not to mention you, a little chi cultivating stage cultivator. Although you have my 9 layers of seal, so in theory there won't be too much danger, but what can a 1,200 years old sword spirit do? So I'll give you a chance to choose. Do you want to keep this sword spirit? If you don't, then I'll ask Senior Martial Brother to wash away the sword spirit's memory for the past 1,200 years, and obediently recognize you as its master. Although it will lack the various supernatural abilities of a 1,000-year-old sword spirit, at least it will be stable. If you keep it. Wang Lu didn't wait for her to finish. Of course I'll keep it. Is there a need to hesitate? Master smiled. You're quite decisive. Humph, even that idiot Jifeng didn't wash away his memory, why should I bother to be that idiot who destroys his precious weapon? So what if it's been 1,200 years? It's just a mere sword spirit. If I say I can train it, can't I? Boss. The sword of Mount Kuan shook again, obviously extremely angry. Master thought for a moment. To be honest, just because of what you said just now, I think it's better to wash it away. In the end, Wang Lu didn't wash away the sword of Mount Kuan's autumn beam's consciousness. Regarding the matter of training the sword spirit, he showed extraordinary confidence. In his words, he was able to farm points in the Peach Blossom village until the great array was shaken. A mere 8th grade sword spirit was nothing to him. However, the first meeting between Wang Lu and the sword spirit autumn beam was not pleasant. With the help of his master, Wang Lu extended the perception of his primordial spirit outside of his inner mansion, and touched the sword of Mount Kuan that was like an embroidery needle with 9 layers of seals. The interior of this 8th grade spirit treasure was really extraordinary. Clouds and mist covered most of the field of vision, but the part that could be seen was actually a mountain range. Surrounded by the mountains, a woman in apricot yellow clothes was quietly waiting for Wang Lu. The sword spirit autumn beam. This was the first time that Wang Lu communicated with the sword spirit using the inner vision technique. He saw that the woman in front of him seemed to be in her early 20s. Her appearance was elegant and refined, but her expression was as indifferent as ice. She stood motionless on a stone platform, as if she had merged with the stone platform, motionless for thousands of years. Hello? The woman slightly closed her eyes and ignored him. Wang Lu was a little depressed. Sure enough, a 1,000-year-old tortoise has reached the end of its life. Miss, have you passed away? Then the woman opened her eyes. Although she did not speak, her eyes were filled with displeasure. Then, without waiting for Wang Lu to say anything, his master's primordial spirit quietly floated over, and gave him a violent knock on the head. You idiot! You can actually make the generous earth element sword spirit so angry that it became as cold as ice. This is simply a skill. Seeing that Wang Wu also came in, Autumn Beam finally said, "You don't have to worry about anything. I have followed more than 10 masters in my life, and have never betrayed them." Wang Wu was silent for a moment. "Even if you follow such an unreliable master," Autumn Beam said again, "indeed I have never seen such a master, but it is still a novel experience. I am looking forward to what kind of experience he will bring me." Although she said that, she still refused to look at Wang Lu. As she said, the sword of Mount Kuan had changed too many masters in the past 1,200 years. Among them there were even evil devils. Autumn Beam's nature was indifferent. She showed the necessary loyalty to each master, but it did not mean that she did not have her own thoughts. A dignified 8th grade spirit treasure was given to a 7th grade chi cultivating stage cultivator. No matter how generous Autumn Beam was, she still felt some anger in her heart. Not to mention that this new master seemed to have a bad temperament, and his mouth was extremely bad. It was really unpleasant. With the sword of Mount Kuan, Wang Lu had nothing else to ask for. Of course, it was also because he could not ask for it. His master, that poor bastard, was generous enough to give him the sword of Mount Kuan that was worth hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. Now it seemed that it was worth even more. Counting on her to continue to be generous, With the sword of Mount Kuan for the next month, Wang Lu was busy practicing the sword. 8th grade spirit treasure, even with 9 layers of seal for a 7th grade chi cultivating stage cultivator, it was too heavy. Even if Wang Lu, under the guidance of his master, gave up almost all of his spell cultivation and focused on the way of the sword, hoping that in the future, he would be able to break 10,000 methods with one sword. However, now that he held the sword of Mount Kuan in his hand, he still felt that his head was heavy and his feet were light, and it was difficult to distinguish the priority. The 3rd layer of non-phase sword art, if placed in the mortal world, would already be considered an extraordinary and refined top sword art. However, Autumn Beam, this 1,000-years-old sword spirit, had a very keen vision. Wang Lu's swordsmanship was simply full of flaws, and she could not bear to look straight at it. Therefore, when Wang Lu moved his sword, Autumn Beam would often subconsciously correct his movements. This made Wang Lu very unhappy. "I practice my own sword art, what does it have to do with you? Your sword art is brilliant, but it's not on the same path as my non-phase sword art. A forceful girl is not sweet, thank you. As a sword spirit, you should have the awareness of a sword spirit and be a good audience." As a result, this reprimand made Autumn Beam tremble in anger. "Good, since you're so confident, then rely on your own strength to move the sword." Then Wang Lu could no longer hear Autumn Beam's voice. Of course, this was not important to him, but the more troublesome problem was, when Autumn Beam disappeared, the sword of Mount Kuan suddenly felt as if it had 1,000 caddies of weight. Wang Lu cursed, and the sword of Mount Kuan fell straight down, almost dislocating his wrist. When he went back and asked his master, he found out that at the level of spiritual treasure, the communication between the cultivator and the sword spirit was extremely important. The most crucial point of the spiritual treasure's power was the synchronization rate between the cultivator and the sword spirit. Initially, Taoist Master Jifeng was kind to Autumn Beam, but limited by his perception, Tao heart and other factors, the synchronization rate was at most 80%. Relying on other means, he was barely able to upgrade the sword of Mount Kuan to the 7th grade. But Wang Lu's situation was even worse. He was not on good terms with Autumn Beam, so the synchronization rate was basically negative. The fact that the sword of Mount Kuan did not devour its owner was because of Liang Qiu's kindness. To solve this problem, Wang Lu spent an entire month. He was too lazy to argue with Liang Qiu, and in this month he only did one thing: train his sword. How to train? Of course it was to find someone to spar with. Of course it was Aya. A few days ago the chef of Misty Peak was provoked by the sword intent. Now his fighting spirit was strong, so these days the food in the cafeteria had a bit more awe-inspiring sword intent. Damn it, the Western Continent dog chefs look up at the starry sky didn't even pick out the fish bones. As a result, there were even fewer visitors from Misty Peak. Other than looking for Wang Lu to practice her swordplay, Aya really had nothing else to do. At first, Aya was taken aback. After not seeing him for a day or two, how could this genius youth's swordsmanship have weakened so much? Sure enough, it's not good without my look up at the starry sky. Later, when she asked about the truth, she was full of praise for Wang Lu's choice. A swordsman should have the determination to forge ahead, and the temperament to cut through the thistles and thorns. Wang Lu's practice with a heavy sword seemed stupid, but it was like running with sandbags tied to his legs. The result of doubling the fatigue was that the effect of his practice would only be better. Thus, another month quickly passed by. In this month, Wang Lu cultivated the non-phase method and non-phase bone every day. Although his realm did not break through, it gradually stabilized and his attribute bonus increased a bit. Then, most of his energy was used to practice his swordsmanship with Aya. Thus, his biggest progress was in his non-phase sword art. According to his master's division, there were still 3 layers, but the 3 layers were completely different. 1 month ago, his 3-layer non-phase sword art was just a mortal sword art. 1 month later, Wang Lu could not release his sword qi, nor could he create a curtain of light, but his swordsmanship had reached a higher level, and he had the qualification to advance to the immortal path. Because 1 month later, his 3-layer non-phase sword art had the assistance of the sword of Mount Kuan. In other words, Liang Qiu gave in. Although this Millennium Sword spirit still did not like his new master, Wang Lu, after a month of careful observation, Liang Qiu had to admit that Wang Lu was really an excellent swordsman. His embryonic form of non-phase sword art was indeed full of flaws, but as a foundation and framework, it was good enough. Therefore, after some deliberation, Liang Qiu gradually cooperated with Wang Lu. Although the synchronization rate between the two was unbearably low, and although this spiritual treasure still had 9 layers of seal, that was only because his cultivation base was not high enough. However, from the actual combat effect, Wang Lu's 3-feet sword defense's defensive power had increased several times. With Aya's brilliant swordsmanship, under the premise of maintaining the same power output, it would take her at least 100 moves to break through the defense. Then, the experiential learning for the new disciples of Lingjian School officially began. Chapter 78. With the dull ringing of the bell on the stellar peak of the Spirit Sword Mountain, the Lingjian School's experiential learning for new disciples, which was held once every few decades, officially began. All the disciples below the foundation establishment stage were kicked down the mountain by the elders, regardless of the special reason, whether it was physical discomfort, or if they were in a critical period of closed-door training, they were treated equally. Furthermore, the elders had even sealed the bedrooms of their disciples, leaving no way out. Some of the disciples were jubilant, some were eager, and some were at a loss. But in short, in the coming year they had to rely on themselves. Most of the people had already done their homework in the 1-month preparation period before the event. Although the Blue River region was only one of the 9 regions, and it was a relatively remote and impoverished region, compared to a group of small qi cultivating stage cultivators, it could still be said to be vast and boundless. There were hundreds of large and small mortal world countries. Among them, the larger one was the ancient Yong country, which had a population of nearly 100 million, accounting for 1/20th of the entire region. The smaller one was the White Moon country, which had a population of more than 1 million. As for the number of cultivators, it was about 1,000 to 1. Of course, most of them were non-organic cultivators. If the ratio of pure organic cultivators was 1 in 10,000, it would already be considered good. For these newcomers who had just entered the immortal path, the mortal world still had countless wonderful things, which would only dazzle their eyes when they went down the mountain. However, the Heavenly Policy Hall's senior brothers and elders of the Lingjian School actually provided a humane service. For each new disciple, they made an experiential learning instruction manual. Not only did it list some common knowledge that should be acquired during the experiential learning, it also drew up a map, listing out the recommended experiential learning locations, such as the White Moon country where there was a recent conflict with the Xingjing sect, and the Desolate country, where there was a rumor that a magical treasure had recently appeared. These were all places where the wind and clouds met, but because the matter was not big, it was difficult to attract high-level cultivators, so it was suitable for the newcomers to do experiential learning. A year's time was not short, but when it came to experiential learning including the round-trip time, it was only to go to 2 or 3 places and deal with 2 or 3 things. However, there were thousands of locations listed on the map, which was simply dazzling. Most of the disciples attached great importance to this map. In this month they spent half of their time analyzing the map and choosing a location. Because after a year, apart from the progress of their cultivation, the results of the experiential learning would also be measured by that annoying experiential learning report. Moreover, the scores of the report would be scored by the people of the Heavenly Policy Hall. Who would dare to not attach importance to the instruction manual produced by the Heavenly Policy Hall? Wang Lu dared to. On the day he descended the mountain, Wang Lu threw the map aside and single-handedly went straight to the Wang family village in the Marquis County of the Great Ming Country's Eastern Road Prefecture. Of course, A remote and desolate village like the Wang family village would never be listed on the map. Thousands of suggested locations might seem like a lot, but when placed in the context of the entire Blue River region, it was just a drop in the ocean. A mere Wang family village was not qualified. Regarding this, Wang Lu could only say that the heavenly policy hall's good-for-nothings had eyes but couldn't see. Wang family village was the former residence of the void spirit root Wang Lu. In the future he would have to pay a ticket to watch it. The richest man in the Wang family village, Old Master Wang, was worth millions. In the future, when the Wang family village's real estate value increased, he would change his name to Wang Million, or even 100 million. He should be respected, okay? The heavenly policy hall was blind, but he couldn't be blind. His time was only a short 1 year. He could do the experiential learning at any time, but the opportunity to go home was rare. As for the report, as long as he used his imagination, it would be enough. On the way home, Wang Lu's heart was filled with emotion. 2.5 years ago, a mountain village savage, with inexplicable confidence and several thousand taels of silver, bravely rushed into the Spirit Sword Mountain. 2.5 years later, a bright star in the immortal cultivation world slowly rose. How fast the change was! Although his current cultivation was still not high and the immortal cultivation path had just begun, he had an 8th rank spiritual treasure. Not to mention the 9 layers of seal, he had a lot of challenge points in the Lingjian school. In terms of wealth, perhaps he was not inferior to the ordinary King Pill disciples in the Lingjian school. At the same time, as a successor disciple of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, his future had long been bright. This time, it could be said that he was returning home in glory. The only regret was, 2.5 years ago there were 2 people who went to the Spirit Sword Mountain along this road, but when they went back there was only Wang Lu. He didn't know what that kid Wang Zhong was thinking, but he would rather go with Zhu Qin and the others than go home with Wang Lu, as if he was a quarrelsome daughter-in-law. But this did save him a lot of trouble. Although in the past 2 years he had continuously sent letters to his home, explaining the situation, it was obviously difficult for the diligent, low-key, and pragmatic Master Wang to accept his little errand boy to embark on the immortal cultivation path. After seeing each other, both of them would feel uncomfortable, so they might as well not see each other. Excluding this problem, Wang Lu was really looking forward to returning home in glory. After not seeing his parents for more than 2 years, even as a professional adventurer, he couldn't help but miss them. His heart was filled with eagerness. Unlike other immortal cultivators, Wang Lu simply didn't think about the difference between the immortal cultivation path and the immortal cultivation path, or the separation of life and death. His parents were his parents, why would he need to consider whether they were mortal or cultivators? Even if his parents were brought to him by that magical comet, and they were more like adoptive parents, how could the grace of more than 10 years of upbringing be false? Master Wang and his wife, Sui Shi, were the kind of simple and honest people who had no lack of wisdom in life. For more than 10 years, in addition to the grace of upbringing, they also got along very well. When he was a child, his father racked his brains to calculate for a few hundred taels of silver, and his mother spent the whole night in the kitchen, making New Year's goods for the tenant farmers. Although it was just a trivial detail in life, it still gave him a special feeling. As for the difference between the immortal cultivation path and the immortal cultivation path, right now he was only 15 years old. Although his parents were mortals, they were healthy and had at least 30 years of lifespan. Not to mention that it was not difficult to take some elixirs from the Spirit Sword Mountain to extend the lifespan of mortals by 100 or 200 years. It was just that a long lifespan might not be good for mortals. In short, there was no need to worry about things that would happen decades later. In addition, although the Wang family village was just a remote mountain village, it was, after all, his hometown where he lived for more than 10 years. There were hundreds of families in the village and Wang Lu knew each and every one of them by name. For example, the neighbor Wang Dafu, who regarded his father as his enemy and wanted to surpass him in terms of wealth but was always unable to do so. Another example was the ancestral traditional Chinese medicine doctor, Dr. Wang, who specialized in treating all kinds of difficult and complicated diseases. Among the hundreds of millions of people in the 9 regions, they were just ordinary people. However, in Wang Lu's more than 10 years of life, each of them played an important role. The first 12 years of his life were simple and honest, so as a professional adventurer he ought to be bored. In fact, when Wang Lu left his hometown for the Spirit Sword Mountain 2.5 years ago, he did have the pleasure of getting rid of the cage. However, after experiencing 2 years of life as a cultivator, he inevitably missed the easy and simple Wang family village. After getting used to playing with a mature woman, it was inevitable for him to yearn for a lowly, While he was indulging in flights of fancy, Wang Lu's pace was astonishingly fast. When he came to the Spirit Sword Mountain, he first crossed the mountains from the Wang family village to the Marquis County on foot for 2 days. Then he rode the county's carriage, which took him 10 days to arrive at the foot of the Spirit Sword Mountain. Fortunately, the Great Ming country was not far from the Spirit Sword Mountain. On this trip back to his hometown, Wang Lu traveled day and night on foot. In less than 3 days he saw the familiar outline of the Dog-Ear Mountain. This was the advantage of being a cultivator. Even if he was just a level 7 Qi cultivating stage cultivator in the Lingjian school and was not good at footwork, but in the mortal world he was still a top martial arts master, and his speed was faster than a galloping horse. However, when he arrived at the foot of the Dog-Ear Mountain, Wang Lu could not help but stop. What should he do next? This was the first time they met after 2.5 years. How should he appear in front of the villagers? High and aloof, with the posture of an immortal cultivator like an emperor on an inspection tour? Or should he be approachable and cordially greet every villager along the way? This was not a matter of vanity, but it involved a lot of practical factors. As a cultivator with a high EQ, Wang Lu had to plan ahead. However, before he could think of an answer, the scene in front of him made him deeply frown. The change in the surrounding spiritual energy was somewhat abnormal. With the void spirit root, Wang Lu's sensitivity to the surrounding spiritual energy was far beyond that of an ordinary cultivator. Therefore, during his 2 years of cultivation in the sect, he learned a skill called Qi observation technique in his spare time. There were many factors that affected the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. Among them, the behavior of living creatures accounted for the majority, especially human beings. In places with people, the change in the surrounding spiritual energy was far more intense and complicated than in the uninhabited area. A very important part of the so-called Qi observation technique was to explain how to deduce what happened in the place through the change in the surrounding spiritual energy. More than 2 years ago, the Wang family village was like most of the remote mountain villages in the 9 regions. The surrounding spiritual energy was active but not intense, just like a pretty daughter of a humble family. To describe its color, it was about light green. However, what was reflected in his eyes now was a withered yellow color. For a more detailed analysis, Wang Lu couldn't see it due to his limited cultivation level. However, based on this withered yellow color, he could make a preliminary judgment. There were many possibilities. One was that there was a drought year after year which caused the vitality to wither. However, looking at the scene of the Dog-Ear Mountain, it didn't seem like it. Another possibility was that an important person in the village passed away. However, based on the situation of the Wang family village, even the death of the village head or the richest man, Master Wang, would not cause such a drastic change in the aura of the mountain. In the Wang family village, except for the 2 outliers Wang Lu and Wang Zhong, the rest were just ordinary people. The structure of the village was simple and stable, so it didn't matter who was missing. The last possibility was that the evil people wreaked havoc and overflowed with evil energy. Thinking of this, Wang Lu didn't care about any practical problems. He quickened his pace and rushed straight into the mountain. After crossing the highest peak of the Dog-Ear Mountain, Wang Lu finally saw the Wang family village again. The village didn't seem to have changed much compared to 2.5 years ago. With his amazing eyesight now, Wang Lu could clearly see the diligent and happy smiles of the farmers who were busy in the fields. He could also see the angry but doting women who were scolding naughty children. However, the withered yellow aura filled with it made it difficult for him to get over it. After looking for a while at the top of the mountain, Wang Lu still couldn't figure out the main points. After thinking for a while, Wang Lu decided to directly ask his father. It wasn't a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. As a dignified cultivator, why should he be afraid of the slightest thing? Therefore he didn't care about putting on airs. With the dust of running day and night, Wang Lu walked into the Wang family village and went straight to the spacious house in the east of the village, which was also his home. However, the strange thing was that the villagers he met along the way all looked at him with strange eyes, as if they were looking at a rare beast that was on the verge of extinction. There was a trace of pity in their curiosity. Even when they greeted him, they seemed hesitant. Wang Lu greeted him several times with enthusiasm, but all he got was an awkward and even cold response. Damn it, what the hell is going on? Wang Lu's brows wrinkled more and more tightly. His intuition told him that the change in the village was more troublesome than he imagined. Although he didn't know why he didn't receive a reply, at least the villagers should know his identity as an immortal cultivator. In the past, that idiot Wang Xiao who cheated his father of hundreds of thousands of silver taels and sent it to a 9th-rate organization called the 7 Stars Sect, which made the villagers endlessly envious. As a successor disciple of one of the five uniques, he was like a star that descended from the heavens, so why would they sympathize with him? As for that faint hostility, it was even more inexplicable. Hostile to a powerful cultivator who could flatten the entire mountain village in half a day? Did he have maggots in his head? While he was thinking, he suddenly heard someone calling him from the side. Isn't this Wang Fugue's child? Wang Fugue was the name of Wang Lu's father. However, since he became the richest man in the village and had a relationship with the county government officials, he was respectfully addressed as Master Wang. Very few people mentioned his real name. Even the second richest neighbor, Wang Dafu, had to respectfully address him as Big Brother Wang. And there was only one person in the village who would directly address him by his full name. The old village head of the Wang family village, Wang Qinian. Wang Lu turned his head and sure enough, it was the white-bearded, kind-looking old man. In the youth's impression, this old village head was an out-and-out good person, with a generous character and no lack of wisdom. He was an elder worthy of respect. When Wang Lu came down from the Spirit Sword Mountain, he specially brought him a souvenir. "Hey, come with me." The old man sighed and beckoned to Wang Lu. With a belly full of doubts, Wang Lu followed him. Before long, they arrived at the village head's house. "Come in and sit down." After sitting down in the room without waiting for Wang Lu to open his mouth, the village head lovingly patted Wang Lu's head. "I haven't seen you for more than 2 years, you've grown up." Listening to this well-intentioned sigh, Wang Lu smiled and said, "Puberty? It's been hard on you for more than 2 years, right? It's okay, it's not that hard." That's good. Wang Qinian happily nodded, and then immediately sighed. In the past few years, a lot of things have happened in the village. Realizing that the topic might be getting to the point, Wang Lu leaned forward a bit and looked serious. "I can see that there are evildoers running amok in this place." In Wang Lu's view, although this sentence was a bit radical as a pathfinder with his relationship with the old village head, it was nothing. Didn't the village head invite him to his house to discuss the change in the village? And as a dignified immortal cultivator, if he beat around the bush, it would lower his own status, so he might as well get straight to the point. However, this sentence made Wang Qinian's face change greatly. How dare you say that? If the immortals hear it, what should we do?" Wang Lu was shocked on the spot. Where did the immortals come from? Not to mention more than 6,000 years ago, after the Age of Chaos, there has never been a real ascendant. Even in the dream time, the existence of the immortal world is just a legend. Wang Qinian shook his head. "I don't know what Age of Chaos you're talking about, but, alas, that child Xiaohu is right. In the past 2 years you've been deceived too deeply." The hell? What kind of godly development is this? Who is Wang Xiaohu? How could he be deceived? Could it be that in the Spirit Sword Mountain, I've been deceived by a humanoid walking chastity called Wang Wu? The question is, how did the old village head know about the matter in the Spirit Sword Mountain? I've never said anything bad about my master in the letters I sent home. I've never talked behind her back, I've always scolded her face. Chapter 79. The village head's words caused Wang Lu, this professional adventurer, to fall into a considerable confusion. He felt that everything that happened in the village was particularly strange. "Grandpa village head, what's wrong?" Hearing the 4 words village head grandpa, the color of regret in Wang Qinian's eyes became a bit thicker. Looking at Wang Lu's dusty face, Wang Qinian lamented, "Child, all these years, you've gone astray." Although he knew that what he said was definitely not the same thing, Wang Lu still felt distressed. "Damn it, who said it wasn't? But, fortunately, your luck is good." Wang Qinian's expression seemed like he could still be saved. "The Taoist immortals of the 7 Stars sect will soon come to the village to enlighten the predestined person. I think we should be able to ask them to help you. Although your relationship with Xiaohu is not very good, he is a person who remembers old friendship, so he should be willing to come forward to help." When these words came out, in Wang Lu's mind, tens of thousands of alpacas spread their wings like doves of peace, and their droppings fell like rain. The youth felt that these droppings were as dense as a lotus seed, enough to drive him crazy. But, 7 Stars sect? That group of wild chickens and Wang Xiaohu? Wang Lu calmed himself down and suddenly remembered the duel that took place on the cloud platform of the Spirit Sword Mountain a few months ago, as well as the fuse that led to the duel. "I think I probably understand what happened in the village." Wang Lu sneered and inwardly said, "It's really the same as what the textbook says. Looking at the aura, if the color is yellow, then this place might be haunted by a demon, not a big disaster but a group of demons and monsters. I was worried that there might be some hidden devil, but it turns out they're just a group of fake medicine scammers." He didn't say these words to the old village head. Although the old man had white hair and a youthful face, he was actually over 70 years old. If he said these words that were enough to shock his worldview, if he got a cerebral hemorrhage, then that would be a sin. Grandpa Village Head, how long have these Taoist immortals of the Seven Stars sect been in the village? Seeing the dignified expression on Wang Lu's face as he began to inquire about the Seven Stars sect, Wang Qinian thought that the youth had the tendency to turn over a new leaf, which greatly relieved him. Because according to the Seven Stars sect's Taoist immortals, some of the youths who were cheated by the swindlers would become particularly stubborn and difficult to be enlightened. Even if they were killed, it would still be difficult to make them admit that they were cheated. And Wang Lu, who left the village 2 years ago and went to a secluded sect to be his master, was likely to become such a victim. However, in the end he was still the clever and likable child in the village, and he quickly came to his senses. The Taoist immortals came to the village more than 2 years ago. Speaking of which, it is also thanks to the child Xiaohu's good fortune. If it weren't for his extraordinary talent in being chosen by the Taoist immortals, it would be difficult for our Wang family village to have such good fortune. Over the years, many people have been enlightened by the Taoist immortals. Even in the entire Great Ming Kingdom, there are few villages as lucky as ours. Wang Qinian was about to go on and on about the Seven Star sect's great achievements when Wang Lu interrupted him. Who were the people that they enlightened? Wang Qinian said, needless to say, Wang Dafu's family. In addition, Wang Taizhu, Wang Laojian, Wang Shanyao, there are about 7 or 8 people. Wang Lu sneered, thinking, what a coincidence, the richest people in the village are all on the list. The only exception is Wang Shanyao, but he has a beautiful daughter, who happened to be the goddess that Wang Xiaohu has been longing for many years. TSK, this is too unscrupulous. Fortunately, this is the Wang family village, this kind of remote and inexperienced village. If this was another place, it would have been seen through long ago. Then what about my father? As the richest man in the village, he was, of course, the best development target, right? It would have been better if he didn't mention it, but once he did, Wang Qinian began to sigh again. Little Lu, your father, is indeed a fated person in the eyes of the Taoist immortals, but who told the road to happiness to be strewn with setbacks? Wang Lu asked, is it because of Wang Xiaohu's interference? As a result, Wang Qinian became angry. You this child, why didn't you learn anything good in these 2 years? Instead you learned a bad heart from the outside. Although Wang Xiaohu had a conflict with you in this past year, he never said anything bad about you in front of the Taoist immortals. On the contrary, when the Taoist immortals learned that you left the village 2 years ago to worship another Taoist immortal, they originally intended to give up on your father, and even wavered their intention to enlighten the village. It was only because of Wang Xiaohu's persuasion that there was a turning point. Oh, so that's how it is? A smile appeared on Wang Lu's face. No wonder along the way the villagers looked at him with strange eyes. It turned out that they regarded him as the culprit who was deceived by a cult, implicated his family, and possibly even implicated the village. Therefore, on the one hand they were somewhat disgusted, but on the other hand they regarded him as a victim and sympathized with him. He really had to thank Wang Xiaohu for his good words, Then I really have to thank brother Xiaohu. AI, it's good that you know. Originally, your father and the Seven Stars sect didn't have any affinity with the immortals. It was Xiaohu's repeated persuasion that the Taoist immortals listed him as an activist. It was also Xiaohu's idea to let him come forward to build a courtyard for the Taoist immortals. After the completion, they could upgrade it to a development target. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but ask, courtyard? It's a place for the Taoist immortals and other disciples to stay. Although there are a lot of empty houses in our village, how could those dilapidated houses entertain the Taoist immortals? So, village head grandpa, just tell me how much did you spend? Only your father knows the specific number, but it's at least 300,000 to 500,000 taels. Wang Lu almost jumped up. 300,000 to 500,000? Are you trying to build a city? This is, after all, a courtyard for the Taoist immortals. How could it be measured by our mortals' standard? The materials must be carefully selected. Wang Lu sneered. Yes, our villagers' eyesight is not good enough, so the Seven Stars sect must send someone to select the materials for the construction. My father only needs to pay for it. Wang Qinian froze for a moment. Yes, how do you know? Wang Lu laughed again. If it's me, I would also do it this way. Moreover, they are Taoist immortals, so they certainly won't care about the mortal world's gold and silver. Therefore, they probably don't even have an account book, right? Wang Qinian always felt that there was something wrong with this statement, but the fact was unmistakable. This, Taoist immortals would not covet the mortal world's wealth. Hee. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu felt that it was enough. Village head Grandpa, it's impossible for the 7-star sect's Taoist immortals to always stay in the village, but there should be other disciples in the village, right? Wang Qinian was stunned. There is indeed. There is a 7-star sect's publicity envoy, who is a senior disciple of the sect. His status is several levels higher than Xiaohu's. Is Xiaohu also there? Yes, he is now the publicity envoy's assistant. Okay, I understand. With that, Wang Lu no longer exchanged pleasantries with village head Grandpa, got up and left. After that, Wang Lu was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, he stood outside the village head's house, using his eyesight to observe the surrounding spiritual energy, trying to find the source of the yellow stain. With his qi cultivating stage cultivation base, it was impossible for him to do so. However, with the best quality void spirit root, before long, Wang Lu saw a trace of yellow stain rising from the east side of the village, which disturbed the entire spiritual energy movement in the village. This was the old residence of his father, Master Wang, who was building a new house to get rich. Although the area was not big in the mountain village, it was rare for it to be clean and tidy. No wonder people took a fancy to it. Interesting, it actually delivered itself to the door. When Wang Lu murderously rushed to the crime scene, he was surprised to find that the source of the evil was preaching inside the house, and there were many innocent onlookers outside, so that his original plan could not be carried out smoothly. According to Wang Lu's idea to deal with this kind of swindler, picking up a weapon and beating them up was more effective than anything else. If they were not convinced, then he could just kill them with a sword, and the others would naturally be convinced. As long as the source of the evil was removed, everything else would be handled with half the effort. However, he did not expect that the publicity ambassador would come to the village, and was unwilling to be left out, diligently doing his business. Now there were dozens of people outside the courtyard, listening with great interest. How could he enter and kill them? While he was hesitating, he heard the publicity ambassador speak in a clear voice. The path to immortality is not far away, it is right beside us. As long as we seize the opportunity, everyone can become immortals. Many sects like to portray immortal cultivation as aloof and unreachable, but that is because their concept of immortal cultivation is outdated. At the same time, they are also worried that our awakening will shake their ruling position. Imagine if everyone becomes a cultivator, an immortal, how can those immortal sects have the qualifications to order us around and be aloof? Therefore, please put down the prejudice in your heart, summon your courage, face the path to immortality and say to yourself, I can do it. Moreover, even if you feel that you are too old and do not want to embark on the path to immortality, you still have to think about your children, right? At this time, the villagers were deeply attracted by his words, and made a thoughtful expression. A few women were even discussing, that's right, I feel that our family's dog has natural spiritual roots, he is the material for immortal cultivation. A few years ago there was a passing Taoist priest who said he didn't have it, I think it was that Taoist priest with bad intentions. Even Dr. Wang, a rare cultured person in the village, echoed, isn't that so? At that time, everyone saw his immortal-like appearance and thought he was some capable person, so they treated him very warmly. But when we asked him to do something he refused in every way possible, he really doesn't look like he has real skills. Wang Lu's expression became more and more serious as he listened from outside. The conversation of the villagers was really stupid. If it was the Li family village or the Zhang family village, Wang Lu would at most scold them for being retarded in his heart. However, growing up in the Wang family village, Wang Lu was very clear that this simple and honest village should not have such hostile villagers. There was no doubt that the withered yellow color was not only a change in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but it had also been projected onto people's hearts. There was no such thing as a simple and honest people in the world. In Wang Lu's view, perhaps after a few decades or 100 years, when he became famous and the Wang family village became the former residence of an immortal cultivator, this small and fresh social atmosphere would naturally not be able to be maintained. However, both were women. Spending a night with a prince on a white horse or being raped by a giant mountain ape were two completely different concepts, okay? At this time, someone in the house asked, then may I ask Mr. Zhou, how should we grasp this immortal fate? As soon as this person's voice sounded, Wang Lu could not stand still. Because the person who spoke was his father, the richest man in the Wang family village, Master Wang Fugue. And the following conversation was even more maddening. To be specific, it depends on whether your heart is sincere or not. Didn't I say it before? First, build a courtyard for the several Taoist immortals of the Seven-Star Sect, and then we can talk about the rest. Old Master Wang said hesitantly, but it's just a courtyard, yet it actually cost 1 million. This is also... Oh, Master Wang is reluctant to part with the money? Master Wang suddenly broke into a cold sweat. It's not that I'm reluctant, it's just that. I think I'm a person with shallow fortune. In this life, I'm already satisfied with just a little bit of wealth, so I'd rather forget about the immortal path. Seeing the richest man flinched, that public publicity envoy chuckled. Master Wang, actually this matter is not just about your opportunity, but the entire village's immortal fate. If you build this courtyard for the Taoist immortals in the future, when the Taoist immortals come, everyone will benefit from it. Could it be that Master Wang has the heart to ruin the entire village's immortal fate? How could old Master Wang bear the weight of this accusation? He immediately trembled. If that's the case, then that 1 million, seeing that he was about to clench his teeth and agree, a righteous voice suddenly sounded from outside the door. All of you stop. Chapter 80. All of you stop. While they were talking, a young man in red and white entered the room like a gust of wind. His face was covered in dust, but there was a hint of a sneer on his face. Interesting. The swindlers of an evil sect actually dared to mess with me. This Blue River province really needs to be regulated. The publicity ambassador was taken aback. May I know who you are? Thank you for asking. I'm your father. Wang Lu resisted the urge to raise his sword and slash him. He answered with a fake smile. In front of his fellow villagers, he still hoped to solve the problem in a peaceful way, but it was really difficult to vent his anger, so his gaze was as horrifying as it could be. However, this Mr. Zhou, who was sent by the Seven-Star Sect to preach, was not an easy person to deal with. Although he was stared at by Wang Lu until his legs went soft and his bladder went numb, his face remained calm. Ignoring his rudeness, he turned around and began to mobilize the crowd. Everyone, does anyone know whose child this is? The villagers didn't react at first, but after a while, some of them vaguely recognized it. This child. Could he be little Lu? Hearing this, old Master Wang's body trembled. He stood up in disbelief. Little Lu? It's you? Being called by his father, Wang Lu couldn't pretend that he didn't hear it. He waved his hand and said, Father, please sit down and don't make a sound. After I've dealt with this swindler, we can talk about our father-son relationship. At this time, Mr. Zhou came back to his senses. Wang Lu? You're the Wang Lu who went out to seek immortality 2 years ago? Wang Lu sneered, That's right. What can I do for you? I don't dare to give advice, it's just... Mr. Zhou said and then leisurely smiled. It seems like you have some prejudice against our Seven-Star Sect? Prejudice? What a joke, would you be prejudiced against a pile of dog poop? Mr. Zhou's expression suddenly changed. Kid, do you know that a loose tongue can cause trouble? If you insult the Seven-Star Sect, be careful that the Taoist immortals of the Seven-Star Sect will send disaster to you. While speaking, his eyes swept around. It's more likely to implicate other people. This was another trick to mobilize the masses. When the villagers of Wang family village heard this, they immediately became noisy. Little Lu, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to Mr. Zhou. You shut up and apologize to Zhou. Hearing the quarrel behind him, Wang Lu's face turned black. All of you shut up. The sound of his voice was like muffled thunder and the dust on the roof of the roof. The surrounding villagers were immediately shocked. Although he was just a level 7 chi cultivating stage newcomer, in the mortal world, Wang Lu had long been a transcendent figure. In the army, he was a peerless general who could fight against 1,000 men. In the martial arts world, he was a super great grandmaster. With just a lift of his hand, he could easily deter a group of mortals. Wang Lu thought for a moment. Although giving the name of his sect to this lowly swindler seemed to damage his sect's reputation, if he could make this Seven-Star Sect retreat, it would save him a lot of trouble. Lingjian School. Mr. Zhou frowned. Lingjian School? After a moment he nodded. Turns out you're the disciple of Lingjian School. No wonder you have such skill. However, even if it's Lingjian School, it still needs to be reasonable. For no reason you humiliated my Seven-Star Sect, and then used overbearing means to intimidate the innocent villagers. This is somewhat unreasonable. Wang Lu was shocked. What the hell, are you crazy? After hearing the name of Lingjian School, you actually didn't obediently kneel down and lick my name, but instead you want to argue with me, a successor disciple. You really have the guts. In the past, when this old man brought that dead fatty to the small clear sky peak, I was not as bold as you. Admittedly, in theory, no matter how big one's background was, there should be a reason, but in the 9 regions, how could there be so many reasons? The bigger the fist was the hard truth. And no matter how much the Lingjian school declined, it was, after all, one of the 5 unique immortal cultivation sects. Not to mention the 10 elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall. Even if a senior disciple came, he could easily trample over 100 of these 7 stars sect. Arguing with the Lingjian school? Do you think you're worthy? However, in the face of Mr. Zhou's spirit of seeking death, Wang Lu's interest was piqued. Oh, you want to reason with me? Being stared at by this young man, Mr. Zhou felt uncomfortable all over, but he still maintained his imposing manner. Yes, I want to reason with you. Just now you insulted my 7-star sect, so there must be a reason. Wang Lu smiled. Reason? Does the Lingjian school need a reason to trample on people? Forget it, I'll be a bit more honest. Is deceiving the common people enough? Oh, how can I deceive the common people? Mr. Zhou laughed out loud and then began to mobilize the crowd. Everyone, do you feel that I've deceived you? One after another, the ignorant villagers echoed, There's no such thing, Mr. Zhou. That's right, that's right. Listening to you talk about the difference between immortal and mortal, we, the country folks, are suddenly enlightened. Mr. Zhou, you said that our family's dog also has the immortal cultivation spirit root. I absolutely believe you. Little Lu, don't make trouble. Wang Lu frowned and then his voice shook the surrounding area. All of you shut up. Surnamed Zhou, don't use the ignorant people as a shield to fish in troubled waters, or else I'll directly kill you. This was not a bluff. That naked murderous intent caused Mr. Zhou's heart to palpitate. Very well, then please tell us how exactly did our 7-star sect deceive the common people? Based on your words that everyone can become an immortal, I know that your 7-star sect is just a lowly swindler. If everyone can become an immortal, why don't we see immortals springing up like bamboo shoots after the rain? Who knew that Mr. Zhou would laugh, but his attitude was as if he had finally fallen into his rhythm. Good question. This question has actually been bothering the immortal cultivation world for tens of thousands of years. In the past, people thought that the immortal fate was predestined, and only a few lucky people with natural spirit root could embark on the immortal path. But actually that's not true. The heaven is fair, giving everyone the same opportunity. It's just that, we haven't discovered it until our 7-star sect's patriarch, Taoist Master Shen He, created the 7 stars pill, which opened the door to the immortal path for all living beings. Wang Lu suddenly laughed. That's simply slapping your own face. When your 7-star sect sold 6 harmonies pill and spirit root development pill at a high price in the past, why didn't you mention the 7 stars pill? Not to mention the one who made mortals cultivate to a mortal cultivation world is Patriarch Lu Ha of the Xingjing sect. What does it have to do with your patriarch Taoist Master Shen He? You dare to use Xingjing sect's tiger skin? However, Mr. Zhou's response was simply jaw-dropping. Hee, that's just the common people's opinion. Actually, Patriarch Lu Ha is our Taoist Master Shen He's junior brother. Most of his skills were learned from Taoist Master Shen He. That 6 harmonies pill and 6 harmonies pill are actually just simplified versions of the 7 stars pill. Although the cost is lower, the effect is not as good. Although taking the 6 harmonies pill can also set foot on the immortal path and prolong one's lifespan, compared to the 7 stars pill which can make people immortal, it's far from it. However, the 7 stars pill is the sect's treasure. How could we casually sell it to outsiders? If not for your Wang family village having a big opportunity, you wouldn't even have the qualification to know the existence of the 7 stars pill. Therefore, in the past few years, the 7 stars sect only sold 6 harmonies pill to you. Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. This Mr. Zhou was really capable. He was indeed worthy to be the publicity ambassador of this deceiving sect. He could even come up with such a nonsensical reason. What's more, in the face of this explanation, which was too much to complain about, even Wang Lu felt like a rabbit pulling a turtle. Because there was a very important issue here. The debate with this Mr. Zhou was not to refute the opposite party, but to win over the audience. The 7 stars sect has been developing their influence in the Wang family village for a long time, and the entire spiritual energy in the village has been tarnished by them, which was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. To correct this influence, the best way was to tear off the deceiver's mask in front of everyone's eyes, exposing their true colors. Of course, there was also a simpler way. If Wang Lu had the cultivation level of foundation establishment, no, as long as he was a high-level qi cultivating stage, he could learn 1 or 2 exquisite spells from the sect, which would be enough to fool this group of inexperienced barbarians. Unfortunately, what he learned was then one sword to break 10,000 methods, and the way of the sword was specialized in defense. Although the actual combat effect was amazing, and according to his master's evaluation, its hardness was enough to make a low-level foundation establishment stage cultivator feel embarrassed. However, it was useless in this situation. Relying on the debating method to expose the scam, there was a difficulty, and that was, the audience was subjectively inclined to the opponent, and their brains were hopelessly stupid. And Mr. Zhou was undoubtedly an expert in brainwashing idiots. Just now, there was not a single word of truth in that explanation, which any regular immortal cultivator could directly refute. However, Wang Lu knew that even if he caught any point it would be meaningless. Because the audience simply didn't know the truth. If Mr. Zhou said that Taoist Master Shen he was the martial brother of Patriarch Six Harmonies, they would certainly believe it without hesitation. However, if Wang Lu said that Taoist Master Shen he was just a lousy birdman, this group of villagers would be furious. Debating in such an environment was overwhelmingly disadvantageous to him. However, it was also because of this that it was more interesting. Because, although the situation seemed to be disadvantageous to him, the real fatal flaw was the opposite party. As everyone knew, in a qualified debate, there should be no difference in the quality of the two sides' arguments. Otherwise, if one side argued that the sun rose from the east and the other side argued that it rose from the west, then there would be no fun. And now, the Seven Stars sect undoubtedly wanted to say that the crow was white and the sun was rising from the west. Even if the audience was inclined, there was a fatal flaw in their argument. Then, as long as he found out these fatal flaws, the real face of the swindler would inevitably be exposed. And the flaw was in fact obvious. Why do we have to charge? Mr. Zhou was stunned. What? Since your Seven Stars sect's purpose is to deliver all living beings from suffering, to make everyone become immortals, why do you covet the mortal world's gold and silver? 1,000,000 taels of silver is a painful number for my father, but it's nothing to an immortal cultivator, right? Mr. Zhou said with a smile, it's not that I covet money, I just need you to show your sincerity. This issue could be said to be a cliché for the Seven Stars sect's publicity ambassador, and it was also a topic that could not be avoided in the development of the Seven Stars sect's business. Regarding this, Mr. Zhou had already expected it and had long studied it. Usually, people would repeatedly emphasize how passionate their sincerity was, and they didn't need money to prove it. However, for mortals, there was nothing more effective than money to prove their sincerity. Anyone could swear, but not everyone could do it with real money. The topic of sincerity could be said to be his home ground. However, the next moment, Mr. Zhou found out that the youth in front of him directly flipped the table. Sincerity? What's that? Didn't you say that because the people in the Wang family village have a great opportunity, they were favored by the sect's immortals? Since the villagers already have that opportunity, what's the use of sincerity? Mr. Zhou was suddenly at a loss for words. After a moment he said, opportunity and sincerity of course both are indispensable. Otherwise, do you want our Seven Stars sect's people to beg you to become immortals? Wang Lu immediately laughed. Of course, isn't it the same in the immortal cultivation world? Disciples with good aptitude and affinity to immortality are treasures wherever they go. Each sect's reward giver elders spend a lot of effort every year to find talented people with affinity to immortality. Even if the other party is unwilling, they would still be forcefully dragged back to the sect. Is your Seven Stars sect special? Without waiting for Mr. Zhou to refute, Wang Lu further said, sincerity is mutual. The Wang family village has the sincerity to seek immortality, but your Seven Stars sect's sincerity to enlighten the world? Just a few bowls of talisman water and a few packets of Six Harmonies powder is sincerity? 1,000,000 silver coins is an astronomical number for anyone in the village, but a few packets of Six Harmonies powder is not even a drop in the bucket for you. Is this fair? This, Mr. Zhou was dumbfounded. It wasn't that Wang Lu's words were impeccable, but rather, he had never encountered such a problem before. How could Wang Lu give him this opportunity? Secondly, if the Seven Stars sect really wants to enlighten the world, why do we need to talk about sincerity? If everyone is fated, then let it be. If everyone is fated, then let it be. Sincerity? How much is it worth? People's hearts are fickle. Today you have sincerity, but tomorrow you might regret it. What's the use of this kind of sincerity? If your ideal of everyone becoming an immortal is true, then you should unconditionally distribute your Seven Stars powder to the world's fated people. There's no need for sincerity. With that, Wang Lu put on a victorious posture, waiting for the other side to struggle. Sincerity seemed to be the home field of the Seven Stars sect swindlers, but in fact, it was their fatal weakness. The swindlers might have an extravagant theoretical basis, but they would never have sincerity. Grasping this point, they would be successful in every endeavor. Moreover, the more wonderful thing was, the villagers' mentality was no longer as simple and honest as before. Gradually, they began to realize their selfishness, greed, and other negative emotions. And he used this emotion to force the opponent into a disadvantageous position in public opinion. The reason was very simple. If the villagers could obtain the so-called immortal fate at a lower cost, these people would immediately change sides. In just a moment, Mr. Zhou was already drenched in cold sweat. He had been in the Seven Stars sect for several years. Relying on his lotus flower persuasion skill, he had made great contributions to the sect. Not only did he have a very high status, but he was also bestowed the immortal fate by the sect's elder. In the past few years, not to mention this remote mountain village, he had even absorbed a prefecture city into his sect. It could be said that he had gone through hundreds of battles, but he had never encountered such a situation. Who exactly is this young man? Isn't he just a low-level disciple of the Lingjian school? Why does he give me such a strong sense of oppression? How could a mere Lingjian school have such an outstanding talent? However, at this time he couldn't think too much about it. According to his master's instruction, if he encountered such a situation, he must immediately use his unique skill without any hesitation. People's hearts were the most fragile thing. Especially when the Seven Stars sect had yet to gain a firm foothold in the Wang family village, they didn't have enough prestige to make the villagers sacrifice their lives for the sect. Once they were incited to develop the habit of bargaining with the sect, then the sect's plan to develop their force would be greatly hindered. Therefore, Mr. Zhou put on a panicked expression, but he had already made up his mind to use his unique skill, which had a big side effect, but in a short period of time would be successful. Mr. Zhou raised his hand, which was holding a handkerchief, as if he wanted to wipe off the sweat on his head. However, under the handkerchief, an undetectable purple-black ray of light, like a lightning, shot toward Wang Lu's throat. Kid, if you want to blame someone, blame your bad luck for opposing my Seven Stars sect. Seeing that you're young but your cultivation is not bad, I'm afraid you really have an affinity with immortality. Unfortunately, you still can't block my Seven Stars sect's 7 stars penetrating bone nail. Mr. Zhou's unique skill was a low-level magical tool that was given to him by the sect. Although it was only a low-level magical tool and it could only be used once, the power of this penetrating bone nail was far beyond the imagination of mortals. A small nail could penetrate more than 1 meter thick rock. Moreover, the needle's tip was coated with a highly toxic poison. Once it touched the blood, not only the throat would be sealed, the victim's flesh and bones would also turn into mud, a horrible sight to behold. As long as he unexpectedly shot this needle, even a middle-level qi cultivating stage cultivator would find it difficult to detect it, let alone resist it. Not to mention this young boy, how could he have a middle-level qi cultivating stage cultivation? As long as he died, he could blame it on the wrath of the heavens. Although the villagers, especially that Master Wang, would be dissatisfied, under the threat of the wrath of the heavens, who would dare to disobey? With a trace of sneer, Mr. Zhou looked at Wang Lu as if he was looking at a corpse. However, at this time he suddenly found out. The clear eyes of the youngster were looking straight at him. The corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous smile as he had expected. Then, a slender hand, as if he had foreseen the future, perfectly blocked the front of his throat. 2 fingers gently pinched the 7-star penetrating bone nail. His body trembled slightly. The penetrating bone nail, which was powerful enough to penetrate the rock, was stopped. Mr. Zhou was horrified. This penetrating bone nail was called a concealed weapon, but even if it was activated in front of someone, without a high-level qi cultivating stage cultivation, it would be difficult to resist, not to mention using one's body to block it. What kind of divine being is this boy? Then an even more horrifying performance began. Wang Lu pinched the penetrating bone nail and then, he directly put it into his mouth and chewed it. That crunching sound seemed to be pounding on Mr. Zhou's heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. When Wang Lu swallowed all the residue into his stomach, in his eyes, this young cultivator had already turned into an evil demon. Ridiculous, this power is still inferior to Aya's look up at the starry sky. Chapter 81. The easiest way to deal with a swindler was to kill him with a sword, but Wang Lu didn't want to start a massacre in Wang family village, so he didn't do it. Otherwise, with the spirit of a professional adventurer, there was no need to argue with a low-level swindler. It was like a pig rolling in a muddy pond. Do you want to jump into the mud and wrestle with it to prove that your rank is higher than it? Kill it with a sword and then eat the braised pork. The food chain's rank was enough to prove everything. However, although he couldn't defeat the opponent physically, it was the same from another angle. To kill a person, he could also kill him spiritually. What Wang Lu did now was to force the opponent into a corner with words, and then when the opponent tried to make a comeback with a unique skill, when the expectation in the opponent's heart was raised to the maximum, Wang Lu firmly pressed the opponent to death, and under the great ups and downs, completely broke the opponent's heart defense. It was not a complicated skill, and it was useless against people with strong mental strength. However, the opponent in front of him was just a third-rate swindler, so this trick was enough. Sure enough, the guy surnamed Zhou was so scared that he peed his pants. The 7-star bone-piercing nail was given by the school to the publicity ambassadors as a gift. It was used in very special situations. In theory, it could turn the tables in any situation. However, it was chewed and swallowed by the opponent like a bean. Mr. Zhou was really glad that he had just peed himself not long ago. Could a Lingjian school really cultivate such a monster? And he didn't seem to have a high level of cultivation. Why? While he was in shock, perhaps it was God's will, or perhaps it was the outbreak of his professional spirit as a publicity ambassador. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Mr. Zhou's mind. A risky idea, but one that could save him from a desperate situation. To be honest, it was very risky to use it in front of such an opponent. However, even if he didn't use it, the opponent obviously wouldn't let him go easily. If the scam was really exposed, even if he was not beaten to death by the angry villagers, he would be killed by the school's law enforcement elder. Instead of that, he might as well try to turn the tables. Devil? Mr. Zhou suppressed his fear and said coldly. Wang Lu was stunned. What? Mr. Zhou pinched his thigh and said fiercely, Devil? You are indeed the remaining devil of the demon race lurking in 9 regions. You're trying to mislead the people and shake the hearts of the villagers to become immortals. You're trying to destroy the path of ascension of hundreds of millions of people in the 9 regions. Actually, from the very beginning, I've already seen that your devil chi is awe-inspiring, and you're definitely not a good person. It's just that I didn't have any evidence. However, just now, I used the 7-star sect's secret 7-star piercing bone nail to test you, and sure enough, I've exposed your true colors. If you were a righteous person, it was absolutely impossible to chew and swallow the penetrating bone nail. There was a strong anesthetic on it. As long as a normal person touched it, their whole body would become stiff and unable to move. However, because of the innate physique of the demon race, they were immune to all poisons. Wang Lu, when you were flaunting your prowess, you didn't expect your true colors to be exposed, did you? Perhaps Mr. Zhou's fear had reached its peak, but he had gained some courage. His words were bold, confident, and full of vigor. Not to mention that the villagers were all in deep thought. The way they looked at Wang Lu became suspicious. Even Wang Lu could not help but clap his hands. This was really like a cornered dog jumping over a wall. He came up with a brilliant plan. Inverting black and white, confusing right and wrong, coupled with this awe-inspiring righteousness. In the same sentence, if this was a debate, these words were worthless, but to fool the ignorant people it was enough. Sure enough, under the wavering eyes of the villagers, Mr. Zhou was greatly encouraged. He continued, Wang Lu, more than 2 years ago, you left the village to seek the Tao of immortality. Now you claim to be a disciple of Lingjian School, but I didn't know that Lingjian School has accepted a disciple like you in these 2 years. Aha, does Lingjian School still need to ask you for instructions? Lingjian School indeed doesn't need to ask me for instructions. However, 5 days ago, I saw your sect leader, and I heard him personally say that the sect hasn't recruited a new disciple for 3 years. Therefore I find it strange, where did you, a Spirit Sword sect's disciple, come from? I want to ask, where did the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect who hasn't accepted any new disciple for 3 years come from you? Just as Wang Lu was about to say something, he suddenly stopped. Because he found that the eyes of the villagers around him were full of doubt and fear. Needless to say, the devil theory put forward by Mr. Zhou had already taken root in the hearts of the villagers. Although he didn't have any evidence and it was just empty talk, this group of villagers actually believed it. Very well, that's enough. Wang Lu sighed. It's true that there's a specialization in every field. I admit that you're a professional swindler, but even if I continue to argue, I can't convince this group of fools around me, so I'd better not say it. Upon hearing this, Mr. Zhou's heart calmed down. It would be best if the opposite party was willing to admit defeat. Looking at his amazing cultivation base, if they really quarrel, it would not be good for him. Therefore, Mr. Zhou was ready to say a few beautiful words to give the opposite party a way out. However, he didn't expect that Wang Lu's so-called admitting defeat was just a prelude to flipping the table. The next moment, Wang Lu took a step forward and spat out a needle-like small sword from his mouth. That small sword rotated in midair and then quickly elongated to about 3 feet long. The sword's body was simple and heavy, and the edge of the sword flickered, making people shudder. The wrestling with the pig in the mud had come to an end. Wang Lu's entertainment interest had been exhausted, so the next step was to use the human method to solve the problem. Sure enough, killing you is the easiest way. Wang Lu took a step forward and wielded his sword. The sword light was like lightning. Although non-phase sword art specialized in defense and non-phase sword bone's strength and speed bonus was not high, and at the same time, his 7th level Chi cultivating stage defensive power was almost comparable to a foundation establishment stage cultivator, his attack power was not as good as a 9th level Chi cultivating stage cultivator. However, all of this was based on the premise that he was compared with the disciples of Lingjian school. If he was compared with those so-called cultivators in 9 regions, even if it was just a defensive specialization of Wang Lu, his attack power was already strong enough. When the sword was thrust, Mr. Zhou did not have any reaction. It was too late. Although he could barely be considered as a cultivator by taking the 6 Harmonies powder and Spirit Root development pill, after many years of hard work, he was still in the 8th level Chi cultivating stage. His other aspects were even more tragic. Not to mention an elite disciple like Wang Lu, even a Xiantian stage martial artist could easily kill him. It was precisely because of this that Mr. Zhou brought an assistant to the Wang family village. These days that assistant was low-key, even Wang Lu did not notice his existence. But at the critical moment, buzz. With a buzzing sound, the sword of Mount Kuan suddenly stopped, because in front of the sword tip, an unexpected face appeared. Tsk, old friends meet in this way? Although the sword in Wang Lu's hand stopped, it did not move back even an inch. The sword tip almost touched that person's forehead. Xiaohu, I haven't seen you for more than 2 years, but you've become a lot fairer than before. The sword tip was pointed at Wang Xiaohu, whom he hadn't seen for many years. However, the so-called fairer face was of course nonsense. After being pointed at by Wang Lu's sword of Mount Kuan, Wang Xiaohu was already scared to death. However, after several years of experiential learning in the 7-star sect, Wang Xiaohu had indeed grown up. Facing the murderous intent of Wang Lu, Wang Xiaohu not only didn't flinch, but also boldly said, Wang Lu, it's not too late for you to turn back now. Although you've been possessed by the devil, our 7-star sect can still give you a way out, as long as you're no longer stubborn. After hearing this, Wang Lu almost laughed out loud, but the expression on his face was even more frightening. Xiaohu, although I used to laugh at you for being a retard, even if you're a retard, you should know what you're doing, right? You've been in the 7-star sect for so long, can't you see what kind of people they are? Wang Xiaohu's body trembled, but a moment later he loudly said, the 7-star sect is a righteous immortal cultivation sect, the future of the immortal cultivation world, and the hope for us, the masses of mortals, to embark on the immortal cultivation path. In the past 3 years, I have been taken care of by the Taoist immortals to embark on the immortal cultivation path. Although my cultivation is not high and my cultivation is very bitter, I have changed my destiny. I'm no longer an ordinary farmer in the mountain village, but a dignified cultivator. And now, I hope that the people around me can also live such a life. The 7-star sect is willing to help me for a low-level disciple like me to develop here. My heart is only grateful, never doubting. Wang Lu's eyes widened in surprise. Xiaohu, I haven't seen you in 3 years, but your shamelessness has improved a lot. What you said is really good. Then please get out of here. With that, his right wrist moved, and the sword of Mount Kuan was about to thrust forward. However, at this time, Wang Lu was pulled back by someone. You evil creature, how long are you going to be so fierce? If it was someone else who pulled him back and questioned him, Wang Lu would have probably turned around and slashed them with his sword. However, at this time he couldn't do it, because the person behind him was his father. Dad, didn't I tell you to sit still? Wang Lu was really helpless. He withdrew his sword and looked at his father with a wry smile. If I sit like this, do you want me to watch you personally slaughter your own people? Master Wang, who has always been kind, was furious. He pulled Wang Lu with one hand and pointed at his nose with the other. I don't know what you've experienced in the past 2 years, but what's the difference between you and a devil? Wang Lu smiled. How could a devil be as handsome as me? Master Wang said, come with me. After that he reached out and pulled Wang Lu out of the door. Wang Lu smiled. He understood his father's intention. He thought that there was no hurry to kill a pig, and it was not worthwhile to delay him from reminiscing with his family, so he followed. Although there were a lot of people around the house, they were deterred by Wang Lu's fierce power, so no one dared to stop them. Few were saved. Inside the house, Mr. Zhou and his assistant Wang Xiaohu breathed a sigh of relief at the same time. They knew that they had finally passed today. However, this matter would not end here. They had to report to the sect as soon as possible and come up with countermeasures. Mr. Zhou Xiaohu, are you okay? Several concerned village women broke the awkward and silent atmosphere in the house. Then, the villagers asked about their well-being and criticized a certain evil person who carried a sword to commit murder. Sigh, I really don't know what sin Wang Fugui's family has committed to give birth to such an unfilial son. That's right, I used to think that Wang Lu was not a normal person. Yeah, he often said some inexplicable things completely different from other children. It's like he took the wrong medicine. Listening to the complaints of the villagers, Mr. Zhou and Wang Xiaohu looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. Although the process was really a bit too thrilling, the result was not bad. These idiots had no idea what they were doing. Or, they were so stupid that they didn't want to know what they were doing. Chapter 82. On the other side, Wang Fugue pulled his son back home. At home, Madame Suisher was preparing lunch and walked out of the kitchen with a pot of hot soup. Suddenly she saw her husband rushing back and she couldn't help but be shocked. When she saw the youth following behind her husband, the pot of meat soup that she was carrying immediately slipped out of her hand and fell down. At the same time, a figure in red and white suddenly sprinted over and caught the pot of soup with one hand. Tisk, mother, be careful. If this steaming hot soup falls on your feet, it will become a real pig's trotter soup. Brat, you're talking nonsense. Master Wang snappily slapped him in the face. Wang Lu let out a laugh, and then he heard his father's painful groan. Why is your head so hard? Haha, I have a high IQ. As he spoke, Wang Lu held the hot pot with one hand and put it on the table under his mother's surprised gaze. His mother, Suisher, looked at Wang Lu's hand carefully. Is your hand okay? Don't worry, it's fine even if I burn it. With that, Wang Lu's gaze turned to his father and his expression became unusually serious. In the end, I'm already an immortal cultivator. Old Master Wang and his wife stared blankly at the young man in front of them who had changed too much after leaving home for more than 2 years. For a moment they were speechless. After a long time, when Wang Lu went straight to the kitchen to stir-fry the rest of the dishes, he brought them out one by one and sat on the table. Only then did old Master Wang let out a long sigh. Sigh, what's going on? Wang Lu thought for a moment. Do you want to hear the details or the short version? Suisher moved her mouth and wanted to say something, but after looking at her husband, she forced herself to hold it in. Old Master Wang stared at his son sternly. Tell me the short version first. Oh, I succeeded in becoming an immortal and returned home in glory, but I saw a group of evil sects swindling my family, so that's what happened just now. Suisher was a little uneasy. Just now, what happened just now? Hey, don't interrupt. Old Master Wang asked again, you said you succeeded in seeking immortality? This time it was Wang Lu's turn to be puzzled. Dad, I've been sending a letter home almost every month for the past 2 years. Didn't I write about my experience in Lingjin school quite clearly? Other than a few shameful things that I didn't say, I didn't hide anything else. Old Master Wang was even more shocked. What letter? Have you ever written to your family in the past 2 years? The atmosphere at the dining table became even colder. After a long time, Wang Lu asked in disbelief, haven't you received any in the past 2 years? Never. Damn it. Who did this? Wang Lu had been surprised too many times today, so he was not surprised at all. Sure enough, SF Post is unreliable. In any case, it's a business under the name of the Wanxian League. Please don't let down this brand. The so-called SF Post was a large-scale postal agency under the name of the Wanxian League, funded by the mysterious Sky Mansion, and managed by the Wanxian League and several other large organizations and sections. Its main business was to communicate between the immortal world and the mortal world. This was because a flying sword and a psychic talisman were enough to solve most of the communication needs between cultivators. Letters between mortals were handled by courier stations in the mortal world. However, the communication between the immortal cultivation world and the mortal world lacked effective management. It was not until the establishment of the Wanxian League that the world became peaceful and the control of the immortal cultivation world over the mortal world became deeper and deeper. Relying on the golden signboard of the Wanxian League, the SF Post had an unparalleled competitive advantage. It rapidly expanded in the 9 regions and its network was everywhere. However, because of its monopoly position, the service quality continued to deteriorate. It was just that Wang Lu didn't expect it to be so serious that he couldn't even deliver a single letter for more than 2 years. Wait a minute, this doesn't seem to make sense. Even if the service is passive, I have written at least 50 letters in the past 2 years. If I can't even deliver one, it's a bit. Wang Lu thought that something was wrong. It seems like the outside world's information has been intercepted by the 7 Stars sect. Blocking the information is indeed a common trick of the cult. Otherwise, as long as the villagers have some common sense about the immortal cultivation world, they would not be deceived by those low-level swindlers. Wang Lu shrugged. Forget it, if the letter can't be delivered, then it can't be delivered. If you have any questions, just ask me. Master Wang asked, more than 2 years ago, you said you wanted to go out to seek the immortal cultivation world. What happened later? I asked Zhong to go with you, but why didn't he come back? It's a long story. To sum it up, Wang Zhong and I have been accepted as disciples by the Lingjian school. For more than 2 years, we have been practicing on the mountain and have been on the right track. Now we can be considered as immortal cultivators. Because of the sect's organization, I went out to gain experiential learning, so I took the opportunity to go home to visit the 2 of you. As for Wang Zhong, he has his own plan. Wang Lu casually said it, but after those words, Master Wang's heartbeat obviously doubled. His wife, Sui Shi, widened her eyes in disbelief and asked with a trembling voice, Little Lu Air, you really sought the immortal cultivation world? Suddenly, in the heart of this simple and kind-hearted woman, countless stories and legends about the immortal cultivation world and the mortal cultivation world surged. She was happy for her child's boundless future, but there was also a faint trace of sadness. A moment later, her eyes turned red. Master Wang scolded, You woman, little Lu Air stepping on the immortal cultivation world is a blessing that can't be obtained in several lifetimes. Why are you crying? I'm just too happy. Sui Shi wiped her tears. I'm going to cook 2 more side dishes. I didn't expect Lu Air to come back, so I didn't prepare his dishes. After saying that, she stood up and left. Master Wang snorted and explained to Wang Lu, I don't know which storyteller your mother heard some time ago, saying that immortals are not human, that they don't recognize their own relatives, and that there are even some who kill their wives to prove their Tao and other such shocking things. It just so happens that you haven't been home for so long and haven't written a letter, so she has been worried that you have already forgotten about us. Alas, now that you have met us, what is there to worry about? Although he said that, there was a trace of worry hidden in his eyes, but he quickly covered it with a smile. Lu Air, you said that you have sought the immortal cultivation world, then, what is the immortal cultivation world? Can you? Wang Lu smiled, Can I show you a few skills to open your eyes? To calm your heart? Otherwise, you will never believe that I have really cultivated to the immortal cultivation world? Haha, you are indeed worthy to be the well-known Wang Baiwan in the Wang family village. Your cautious spirit of seeking proof is worthy of praise. Master Wang was somewhat embarrassed by his son's words. He suddenly slapped the table. Kid, what kind of attitude is that? Don't be angry. But Dad, I have to explain to you that the so-called immortal cultivation world is not like the acrobatics of the 7 Stars sect, where the fancier the better. You are a frequent visitor to the county town, so you should have the ability to distinguish this. When it comes to acrobatics, they may not necessarily be better than the professional entertainers in the city. Master Wang sighed. Who said that's not true? Although that 7 Star sect's boast is good and they do come up with some real things, but compared to their boasting, it's still far from it. Of course, it's just a lowly swindler organization. They don't even have the qualification to join the outer circle of the Wanxian League, so how could they have any real things? Well, Dad, I won't keep you in suspense. Don't you want to see the real immortal cultivation world? Although my cultivation is still shallow, and I don't have any immortal cultivation world, fortunately, I have a treasure with me. With that, Wang Lu opened his mouth and spat out the needle-like sword of Mount Kuan. This spiritual treasure spun in mid-air, turned into a 3-foot-sharp sword, and then steadily stood on the table. Master Wang had seen this flying sword-spitting mouth skill once in the courtyard, but now that he saw it up close, he still felt that it was incomparably magical. However, those acrobatics artists in the county town seemed to have a similar skill, such as swallowing a sword and so on. I'm not here to show you the flying sword-spitting mouth. Autumn beams, say hello to my dad. The sword of Mount Kuan was silent for a moment, and then it trembled and issued a buzzing sound. After a while, this buzzing sound showed a strange rhythm, and gradually, it became like a human voice. "Hello, I am Wang Lu's sword spirit, Autumn Beam." Ah. Old Master Wang was really frightened this time. A long sword could actually speak human language? Who's talking? The other one who was scared was Sui Shi, who had just come out from the kitchen with a plate of stir-fried food. Startled, the dish began to free fall again. Wang Lu reluctantly lifted the sword of Mount Kuan and thrust it backward. The tip of the sword just happened to reach the bottom of the dish, steadily catching it. "What do you think, Dad? Is there a reply?" Master Wang frowned. "Well, although it's different from what I imagined, it's indeed more reliable than the seven-star sects." Wang Lu shrugged. "Dad, comparing me to the seven-star sect is too degrading. Although your son cultivates the simple and unadorned immortal cultivation world, and temporarily can't release fireworks for you to see. However, those who can only release fireworks and soak in talisman water, even if there were 100 of them, I would still pinch them to death. You can rest assured about this." Feeling the faintly discernible killing intent in those words, Master Wang's heart could not help but be startled. This kind of imposing manner was something that he had only seen in those veterans who had experienced the battlefield in the county. Even if it was just a slight touch, it would make people's hair stand on end. Actually, Wang Lu's so-called killing intent, compared to a real senior cultivator, was still very immature. It was nothing more than the several experiential learning in the small clear sky peak, where he brewed a bit of fierceness from killing countless monsters. However, in the mortal world, it was a killing intent that accumulated from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. After all, even if a mortal world's martial artist had experienced mountains of corpses and seas of blood, what could they do to a few rank 3 monsters? And long before Wang Lu's immortal cultivation method was successful, he had already killed rank 3 monsters to play with. "Hey, tell me and your mother the story of your Lingjian school immortal cultivation method." Wang Lu frowned. "Okay, that's a lot to tell. Life on the Spirit Sword Mountain was actually very monotonous. In addition to immortal cultivation, experiential learning, and being a top student, there wasn't much worth mentioning." However, Wang Lu had been talking non-stop for more than an hour. Even though the food on the table had already turned cold, the old couple still listened with relish. However, before Wang Lu could talk about his second year of life, a burst of noise came from outside the house, interrupting the conversation of the family of 3. Master Wang and his wife looked at each other, and a trace of uneasiness rose in their hearts. However, Wang Lu, whose 6 senses were 100 times sharper than the 2 old people, had already heard the noise outside clearly. He could not help but sneer. "Unexpectedly, in the end, I still couldn't avoid walking on this road. Shameless *tc. With that, he stood up and reached out to grab the sword of Mount Kuan. Master Wang was shocked. "Luger, what are you doing?" "Someone came to die, so I casually took their head." "Dad, just sit there and don't move." "Mom, you too, the next scene might be a bit inappropriate for children." "Wait a minute, Luger, don't rush." Wang Lu shook his head. "Don't worry, I won't target the villagers. Although they are retarded, they are still my fellow villagers. Just think of it as raising a nest of disobedient huskies. But there are some people who hide behind the crowd, treating them as a human wall. If I don't kill them, I won't be able to think straight." Master Wang opened his mouth to persuade again, but Wang Lu said, "Some things, it's better to cut the Gordian knot with a knife. My temporary patience in the courtyard is a typical negative example. Instead, it gave this group of fools the courage to provoke me. If I continue to endure, I'm afraid that one day I won't be able to stop myself." With that, he smiled and weighed the sword of Mount Kuan in his hand. "Sister Autumn Beam, what do you think?" Autumn Beam was silent. After a long time, the sword trembled. "An instigator should be killed." Chapter 83. The spirit of the sword of Mount Kuan, Autumn Beam, was an earth element sword spirit, with a gentle and indifferent temperament. The earth was the mother of all things. In the fairy tales, the earth was often entrusted with the meaning of mother, symbolizing tolerance, gentleness, harvest, and so on. Compared to the explosive fire element and the sharp metal element, the earth element sword spirit usually had the image of a good person. However, this Autumn Beam, after a moment of silence, uttered the word kill. However, if he saw the noisy scene outside the house, Autumn Beam's word kill suddenly seemed reasonable. "Catch that devil? Kill him." The Taoist immortals said that he will bring bad luck to the whole village. A group of about 20 to 30 angry villagers gathered outside Master Wang's house. Holding farm tools, kitchen knives, bricks and other things, they loudly shouted slogans. The crowd was in high spirits. However, Wang Lu's eyes didn't stay on this group of ignorant people for even a moment. As soon as he went out, he locked his eyes on the two people who were surrounded by the crowd. They were dressed in light blue robes and had the demeanor of an immortal. Needless to say, these villagers were naturally incited by someone. Otherwise, in his more than 10 years of living in the Wang family village, Wang Lu had never seen this gentle and comfortable village suddenly erupt with such a strong hostility. The instigators were, of course, the two middle-aged men from the Seven Stars sect. Through the subtle changes in the surrounding spiritual energy, Wang Lu quickly determined that these two people belonged to the Taoist immortals of the Seven Stars sect, which meant they were real cultivators. 4 cultivators who had entered the right path. The spiritual energy in their inner mansion formed a cycle, and the inhalation and exhalation of the surrounding spiritual energy was as natural as breathing. If one's observation skill was strong enough, they could analyze the cultivator's basic cultivation level and even the spirit root's attribute through the other party's throughput, rhythm, breathing composition, and so on. Of course, for a big sect like the Lingjian school, they would generally teach their disciples the method to hide their cultivation level. However, for a small sect like the Seven Stars sect, it obviously wouldn't be so detailed. When the 2 light blue cultivators appeared, Wang Lu immediately saw through them. 2nd grade and 3rd grade Qi cultivating stage trash, huh? TSK, no wonder they use such underhanded methods. Just now, when he brandished his sword of Mount Kuan at the Seven Stars sect's publicity envoy, Wang Lu thought that the Seven Stars sect's reinforcements would soon arrive. However, he didn't expect that the reinforcements were just 2 high-level Qi cultivating stage trash. Even more, he didn't expect that these 2 people would actually use the villagers as human shields. Why would the gentle and magnanimous Liang Qiu be angry? Because if the earth element sword spirit was said to be broad-minded, then the ignorant villagers who were fanned over were exactly the group that she wished to protect. As for the 2 Seven-Star sect cultivators, they were undoubtedly the pollutants that destroyed the earth. Even Mother Earth would not show any mercy to pollutants. I'll skip the opening remarks. You two please die here. Although initially Wang Lu didn't want to create a massacre in the Wang family village because this green and auspicious land couldn't bear too much blood, but now with his current cultivation level, he still couldn't use the spring breeze and rain method to silently erase the traces of the Seven Stars sect's existence. The Seven Stars sect, this malignant tumor, had been deeply rooted in the village for more than 2 years. If he wanted to uproot it, he would inevitably have to bring along a few pieces of intact flesh and blood. There was no other way, so it was a necessary sacrifice. Wang Lu sneered, strode forward, and directly bumped into the human wall. Catch him? Don't be afraid, with the Taoist immortals behind us, this devil is nothing to be afraid of. That's right, we have the talismans from the Taoist immortals, so our strength has greatly increased, so we're not afraid of any devil. Several strong men were the most courageous. Especially with the Seven Stars divine talisman on their back, their brute force increased by 10 times, even more powerful than the village's old ox. Seeing Wang Lu came out, they hastily reached out to grab him, wanting to gain credit in exchange for the favor of the Seven Stars sect's Taoist immortals. However, just as their thick palms touched Wang Lu's clothes, an irresistible counterforce came and bounced them away. A few strong men clenched their teeth and reached out to try again. However, their entire arms were numb and powerless from the rebound. Wang Lu continued to move forward. The several strong men didn't have enough time to reach out their hands, so they stuck out their chests and tried to block him with their bodies. However, just as they touched the opposite party, an even stronger shock force directly sent them flying. Although it wouldn't kill them, it also wouldn't allow outsiders to touch him. Like an inviolable king, wherever he went, he was invincible. Oh, what's going on? The devil is using a demonic technique? Black dog blood, quickly go find black dog blood. Virgin urine is also fine. Oldly, can you do it? F***ck your mother, I your father, am only single, not a virgin. Amidst the quarrel, the crowd became a mess. This was the power of the 7th level Qi cultivating stage's non-phase golden bell cover. When the non-phase sword art was not enough to block all the attacks, the non-phase heart sutra could be used to refine the surrounding spiritual energy, turning it into a protective shield that reflected all the external force. And if the non-phase golden bell cover was also broken, he could use the non-phase sword bone to resist it. However, even the outermost layer of the non-phase sword art was enough to give a foundation establishment cultivator a headache, so it was not easy to break through 3 layers in a row. Along the way, Wang Lu was invincible. He didn't even look at the people around him who were used by other people. He just strode forward, and before long the crowd was smashed into pieces. When had the villagers ever seen a real cultivator? Soon they fell into panic, and under this panic they were even more unbearable. Before long, the two 7 stars cultivators who were hiding among them were revealed. The two of them were surprised, but they still didn't panic. Because Wang Lu didn't hide his cultivation level, a low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator was clearly displayed there. The two high-level Qi cultivating stage 7 stars cultivators naturally didn't need to panic. Although they looked stronger than ordinary low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators, low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators were still low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators. In the immortal cultivation world, a higher cultivation level was a world of difference. Not to mention two high-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators with magical tools, how could they not be able to deal with one person? Boy, surrender without a fight, we can spare your life. The one who spoke was thin, his face was blue, his voice was hoarse, and he looked like a drug addict. However, between the two of them, his cultivation level was higher, and his status was also more respected. He belonged to the 7 stars sect's 4 stars emissary, which was 2 stars higher than the publicity envoy surnamed Zhou. The 7 stars sect wasn't a big organization with a deep background. High-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators could already be considered as the backbone of their strength. As for the 5 stars elder, they only needed to be at the foundation establishment stage. Not long ago, these two people received the Wang family village's publicity envoy's SOS talisman, so they flew from hundreds of miles away with their magical tools. After hearing about the matter, they completely disregarded the publicity envoy's obstruction and immediately brought dozens of villagers to act as human shields. However, now it seemed like they were making a fuss over a minor issue. He was just a low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator. Although he was young and had a promising future, in a fight, the one with a good future would not win. To deal with him, there was really no need to dispatch 2 4 stars emissaries. As for the publicity envoy's dissuasion, it was even more unreasonable. What was there to be afraid of? Boy, didn't you hear what I said? On the other side, the slightly fat cultivator impatiently urged. In his view, even if Wang Lu's cultivation level was only low level, he could still distinguish that his and his senior brother's cultivation level was much higher than his. If he still didn't surrender, did he still expect to make a comeback? He put on an aggressive appearance, but with a gap of 2 levels, what could a low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator do? If he didn't show him some colors, he wouldn't know how powerful he was. Therefore, without waiting for his senior brother to speak, the fat cultivator took a step forward and activated his mana, spitting out a mantra, freeze. This was the body freezing technique, which used mana to bind the opponent's body. If the degree of strength used was light, it could paralyze the opponent's body, rendering them unable to move. If the degree of strength used was heavy, even the heartbeat would be locked, turning it into a one-hit kill technique. A high-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator's mantra was enough to freeze a mad elephant. However, Wang Lu just sneered. Idiot. Then he took a step forward and swept the sword of Mount Kuan horizontally, sweeping towards the fat cultivator's cheek like an iron rod. Ha! The body-freezing mantra was completely ineffective. The fat cultivator was taken aback, and the opponent's sweeping sword made him even more puzzled. Wasn't he clearly a cultivator? Why did he use the skills of a mortal world's martial artists? This kind of attack that didn't contain any heaven and earth spiritual energy, what was the point of a high-level Qi cultivating stage cultivator? Freeze? With another mantra, the fat cultivator's mana in his inner mansion turned into an invisible barrier, covering the surface of his body. Although it couldn't be seen, it was actually stronger than an iron plate. Even the ballistae guarding the city would find it difficult to penetrate it, let alone this bang. With a bone-chilling sound of flesh and bone breaking, the fat cultivator was sent flying like a piece of straw. His fat head had turned into a mangled ball of flesh and blood. It fell to the ground and twitched a few times before becoming motionless. Junior brother? The pale-faced cultivator was horrified. Just now, he clearly saw that Wang Lu's sword sweep was just an ordinary sword move. There was no reason for it to break his junior brother's protective spell? Idiot. Wang Lu took another step forward, twisted his waist, and the sword of Mount Kuan drew a ruthless arc, sweeping out again. Move. The pale-faced cultivator didn't dare to block it. With a shout, his body flashed several meters away. At the same time, he raised his right hand and summoned a cloud of purple smoke from his sleeve, floating towards Wang Lu. Ridiculous. Wang Lu simply didn't care what spell the opposite party used. In any case, he had the golden bell shield and the non-phase sword bone. His defense and resistance had been piled up to an outrageous point. A mere high-level chi cultivating stage cultivator was immune to any spell. Thereupon, facing the purple mist, Wang Lu charged forward. The mist containing the highly poisonous insect was sucked into his body, and then, there was nothing else. The pale-faced cultivator spurted out a mouthful of black blood. That purple silk morning heart insect was a middle-rank level 3 goo insect, enough to poison everyone in the Wang family village to death. Moreover, it still had a lot of room for growth. He used his own life essence to refine it, preparing it to attack the foundation establishment stage in the future. However, just now, when Wang Lu sucked it in, 60% of the goo insects were quietly eliminated. He didn't even have the time to avoid the backlash. Seeing Wang Lu's sword sweep over, his whole body was paralyzed and unable to move. However, even though he knew it was useless, the pale-faced cultivator still made a struggle. Solid, solid, solid. 3 layers of solid body technique in a row almost swept away the inner mansion of the pale-faced cultivator. However, with 3 layers of iron plates superimposed, he was confident that he could block it. Unfortunately, don't you have a good memory? Bang. Blood splattered. Even if there were 9 layers of seal, the sword of Mount Kuan was still an 8th rank spiritual treasure. A mere solid body technique was simply meaningless. After killing 2 7-star cultivators with 2 sword strikes, the irritation in his heart was slightly reduced. Wang Lu sneered and swept his eyes around. The villagers suddenly wailed like ghosts and howled like wolves, and before long they all scattered. AI really disappointing. I thought it was an elite monster, but it turned out to be a gray minion. Wang Lu shrugged and turned around to go back to his house. Wait a minute, you, stop. Turning around, he saw that the pale-faced cultivator was still alive and conscious. The big wound on his head caused by the sword of Mount Kuan was gurgling with blood, but the wound was quickly healing. As a miscellaneous cultivator, to have this kind of ability was worthy of praise, but at this time Wang Lu was not in the mood to praise him. Boy, you are really powerful. The magic tool in your hand is really powerful. The pale-faced cultivator covered the wound on his head with one hand and sneered, unfortunately, you are still a bit inexperienced. Now hand over that sword. Otherwise. His other hand was grabbing a 12 or 13-year-old girl. She was the girl who came to watch the fun when the villagers gathered to make trouble. Wang Lu still remembered her name. Dr. Wang's daughter, Wang Lijuan. She was quite sensible and capable at a young age. When her father treated people, she often helped him and was praised by Wang Lu as the head nurse of the Wang family village. However, she had a bad habit. She liked to watch the fun too much, and now she was suffering her retribution. Hey, be a good girl and take out all the good things in your hand, or I will kill this girl. Wang Lu was very puzzled. Wang Lijuan was not his family's child bride. She was only 13 years old. No matter how he pushed her, it would be against the law. Who would hand over the treasures for her? Using her as a hostage to threaten him, wasn't that stupid? Oh, don't pretend to be indifferent. I heard from Zhou Rui that you have a deep feeling for this village. It is impossible for you to watch the villagers die. Wang Lu sighed. So you use this to threaten me? So what? The pale-faced cultivator was already crazy. Hand over the sword in your hand. I know that it is the magic-breaking effect of the sword. It can break 3 layers of my spells, so it is at least a high-rank magic tool. High-rank magic tool. You really don't have a little imagination. Wang Lu couldn't help but feel sad for these low-rank cultivators. In their eyes, high-rank magic tools were probably the pinnacle of tool refining, and they had nothing else to ask for. However, why do you think you are qualified to threaten me? If you have the ability, then try to hurt her. The pale-faced cultivator was stunned for a moment, but then he clenched his teeth and decided to cut a piece of meat from this little girl's body to open his eyes. However, just as he was about to make his move, he found out that he couldn't move at all. His body seemed to be tied up, unable to move. Wang Lu's right hand was holding the sword of Mount Kuan, but his left hand was tightly holding something. Watch carefully, this is the real high-rank magic tool, flowing cloud silk. The pale-faced cultivator had felt that a wisp of silk was coming from all directions to wrap around him, binding him more and more tightly, almost to the point that he could not breathe. Rest assured, I won't kill you today because I want you to go back and tell the 7-star sect's elder and sect leader that if you don't want me to destroy your sect, then get out of the Wang family village as far as you can, and never let me see you again. Although the pale-faced cultivator was frightened, he also felt a trace of joy. He actually managed to escape with his life. The next moment, however, he felt his lower body was cold, and then an even colder voice came into his ears. You can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape the punishment. You dare to lay your hands on a less than 14 years old girl? You better practice the Wuxia sword art. Chapter 84. In the eastern Wei prefecture of the Great Ming country in the Blue River region, on the top of a barren mountain, there was a mysterious altar. Several elderly cultivators gathered here, looking a bit restless. What happened in the Wang family village? An old man wearing a purple robe with 6 blood-colored stars embroidered on his chest asked with a sinking voice. Another 6 stars elder was also quite uneasy. We lost 2 4 stars emissaries, and even the local publicity envoy was killed. Could it be that we provoked a powerful enemy? I've already told you that in the White Moon country we all have to be careful, but you guys still want to expand. Sure enough, you kicked an iron plate, didn't you? That's easy for you to say. If we don't expand, wouldn't our sect's several thousand disciples have nothing to eat? The several old men began to discuss, each sticking to their own point of view. Before long their faces turned red. At this time, a voice suddenly came from mid-air. Don't quarrel. I've just told Pan Qingfeng what happened. They did encounter a powerful opponent. Although young, his strength is unfathomable. Moreover, he has many high-rank magical tools and claims to be a disciple of the Spirit Sword sect. The several 6 stars elders looked at each other. Lingjian school? Have you ever heard of this sect? Or rather, which of the Spirit Sword sects that I've heard of could teach such a disciple? Many high-rank magical tools? In our 7 stars sect, only the 6 stars elders have this kind of financial resources. A relatively calm elder analyzed, at least in the Blue River region, there are 5 sects named after the Spirit Sword sect. Among them, 4 of them are worthless miscellaneous sections. Their sect leader is barely at the foundation establishment stage, and their disciples are even more unbearable. They're simply not worth mentioning. The other one is in the Shanluan country, whose size is similar to our 7 stars sect. Their sect leader seems to be in the Shudan stage. Although it's hard to believe, it's not impossible to cultivate a genius disciple. Shanluan country's Lingjian school? I'm really lucky to be able to meet a genius disciple. Nowadays, the good seedlings are basically monopolized by the sects of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, making it more and more difficult for us individual investors to survive. Alas, we've been reduced to the point of developing our forces in the wilderness. Alright, what's the point of complaining about this now? Those Wanxian League sects are arrogant and look down on us rogue cultivators. Even if they have man-made spirit roots, the grade of it is far higher than our 7-star spirit roots. Us 6-star elders would at most be outer sect disciples or even servants in their sections. We might as well go out and work on our own. Speaking of which, don't you think the name Lingjian School sounds familiar? What's so strange about that? This is one of the most common names in the world of cultivators, right? No, I mean it seems like the Union of 10,000 Immortals has a 5 uniques, which are the top 5 sections. One of them is called Spirit Sword sect. Do you think that disciple is? Before he could finish his words, the elders felt a chill run down their spines. At this moment, the voice in the air was slightly hesitant. It can't be, right? How could that kind of high and mighty sect have anything to do with us? Moreover, if we really provoke a disciple of that sect, to put it bluntly, we're already finished. We'll either be refined into 10,000 spirit blood pearls, or we'll simply be patted into a sesame seed cake and eaten. It's really terrifying. Sect leader, it's not that exaggerated, right? There's no enmity between us no matter what. The voice in the air sneered. Do you think the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League will reason with you? If you really offend one of their disciples, the elders will immediately come to your door. A few years ago, when a disciple of the Royal Soldier sect went out to wander, he took a fancy to a female cultivator. As a result, another high-rank sect's disciple snatched his love away. The Royal Soldier sect's disciple was young and his cultivation base was shallow, so he couldn't compete with him. After being injured, he returned to the sect. Originally, this kind of thing was not a big deal in the immortal cultivation world. However, on the same day, the Royal Soldier sect dispatched 3 Yuaning stage elders to help their disciple regain his face. It is said that that high-rank sect was almost exterminated by the Royal Soldier sect. One can imagine what kind of face those big sects have. Now that we can talk nicely, that Wang family village youth shouldn't be a disciple of a very prominent sect. An elder enthusiastically suggested, that being the case, we might as well send someone to capture his relatives and coerce him to work for us. The nearby elder sneered. Do you want to die? Didn't sect leaders say that he might not have any background? Why would he need a background? Isn't he alone not enough? He's less than 15 years old, yet he can already kill 2 of our 4-stars emissaries. If we give him a few more years, he can single-handedly exterminate our entire sect. How could he be that terrifying? Don't scare yourself. Hey, in recent years, sects like our 7-star sect have been single-handedly exterminated by a certain genius youth. How many of them? A lot of elite disciples of big sects like to use sects like ours to practice their skills. Seeing that the elders were about to quarrel again, the voice in midair was full of helplessness. Enough, stop quarreling. Then, sect leader, in your opinion, what should we do? Let's wait and see first. Our people should withdraw from the Wang family village. At this time it's not wrong to be cautious. Withdraw. But we've been in the Wang family village for more than 2 years. That village is a rare place with rich spiritual energy, which is very beneficial to our cultivation. Yeah, although the Blue River region is big, the Heavenly Cave Paradise has basically been occupied by the Wanxian League. The Wang family village is really rare. Enough, do you think I don't know what you're talking about? But now is not the time to be greedy for the Heavenly Cave Paradise. Only by preserving our lives can we cultivate. However, that doesn't mean we should give up on the Wang family village. Like I said, let's wait and see. If things go smoothly, perhaps we don't need to make our move, and the matter will naturally be solved. Don't need to make our move? What does that mean? On the other side, with his low-level Qi cultivating stage cultivation, he bravely and invincibly repelled the 2 high-level Qi cultivating stage cultivators from the 7-star sect. While he was at it, he also took away the glib-tongued envoy. However, Wang Lu wasn't able to win back the village's former peace and harmony. Of course, this wasn't unexpected. That door had already been destroyed and happiness would never return. That was the logic behind it. Wang Lu wanted to solve the matter with the least cost, but unfortunately he couldn't avoid the massacre. Of the 2 4-stars envoys, one was dead and the other was injured. The publicity envoy's tongue was cut off, and he died without a complete corpse. The 7-stars sect soon withdrew their forces from the Wang family village, but what they left behind was a mess. After operating for 2 years, the 7-star sect's forces have long been deeply rooted in the Wang family village. The theory that everyone can become an immortal was deeply rooted in the people's hearts. When the 7-star sect withdrew, people suddenly felt that their immortal path was severed, and they were filled with sorrow. And the culprit was undoubtedly Wang Lu, who left the village 2 years ago to seek the immortal path, but ended up becoming a devil. Suddenly, no one knew how many people secretly cursed him. Alas, good people don't get good rewards. Facing the early morning sun, Wang Lu leisurely lied in the courtyard. His hand was holding the egg pancake that his mother just made, and he gently nibbled it. He was very relaxed. On the other side of the courtyard, Master Wang was clumsily practicing a set of martial arts, which was taught to him by Wang Lu. It was known as the Immortal Body Forging Fist, which could prolong one's life. Originally, Master Wang was too lazy to practice it. How could prolonging one's life be more important than sleeping late in the morning? Unfortunately, he couldn't resist his wife's urging, so he had to go to bed early and get up early every day. His heart was really incomparably complicated. Hearing his son's complaint, Master Wang was also helpless. The villagers were deceived, don't blame them. Rest assured, we're also immortal cultivators, so we won't go so far as to argue with a group of commoners. But if this goes on, we won't be able to stay in this village anymore. While saying that, Wang Lu looked up at the sky. There were a few white clouds floating in the blue sky. It was a rare good weather. However, in the eyes of the void spirit root cultivators, they could see the withered yellow color of the village. This time it was not caused by an external force, but rather the village itself had rotted away. One of the 7-star sect's Taoist immortals was dead and one was injured. The publicity envoy died without a whole corpse. His tongue was minced. Logically speaking, this should be enough to deter those ignorant villagers. However, as Wang Lu expected, after the massacre, in addition to fear, there was resentment as well as doubled ignorance. The villagers cursed the devil for wreaking havoc, thinking that it was Wang Lu who ruined the Wang family village's beautiful future. Then, they hoped that the heaven would open its eyes and strike him with a lightning tribulation, or that the 7-star sect's higher-level Taoist immortals would descend to the earth and subdue Wang Lu. Then they would continue to spread the immortal fate in the village. In short, although the 7-star sect's people were gone, the situation didn't improve. This village is hopeless. Wang Lu sarcastically concluded. Think of a way. Master Wang wiped his sweat. Aren't you known as the successor disciple of the 5 uniques? If you can't even solve the problem of a small village, what kind of successor disciple are you? Dad, you're being prejudiced. I, the successor disciple, am not here to be a caring sister to the ignorant villagers. If they are willing to die from stupidity, why should I stop them? My sword is only used to fight against a strong enemy. Come on, you just don't want to care about it. Master Wang snappily said, didn't you say this time's trip down the mountain is the sect's experiential learning? Just take this as an experiential learning. Actually, the solution to this problem is very simple. As long as you can make those swindlers admit that they're swindlers, the villagers have no choice but to believe it. Wang Lu froze for a moment. Yes, this idea is feasible, but the next problem is, where do I find those swindlers? They've long been scared by my illustrious reputation and fled 3,000 miles away, right? Moreover, they're a small-scale gang, and their sect leader is probably at the foundation establishment stage or above. I might not be able to deal with them alone. Old Master Wang finished the last fist technique and answered while panting, as for what you want to do, that's your own business. I'm just an ordinary mortal. You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Wang Lu uttered an "oh" sound, lay back on the recliner, and then rocked it with a creaking sound. At this time, Sui Shi came out of the house with a pot of tea and a towel. Seeing that her husband was seriously practicing, she gently smiled. Master Wang sighed with emotion at having a good wife at home, and then he remembered something. Oh, right, you've been practicing in the Spirit Sword Mountain for so long, you should have made some friends. If you can't do it, you can ask your friends to help you. Friends? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu deeply frowned. That's why I have to go back to the mountain in the next 2 days and find a few friends who can fight to help. Dad, Mom, you two must protect yourselves. That night, Wang Lu made a decision. He temporarily said goodbye to his parents and went back to the mountain to find a few able-bodied men. At the same time, in order to ensure his safety, he used his cloud thread to lay a super simple array around the courtyard. Because he didn't deliberately study it, it was almost at the level of a layman. However, it was enough to deal with the ordinary villagers. As for the 7 Stars sect's counterattack, Autumn Beam, please take care of the family. I will do my best. I also know that letting a tool spirit with 9 layers of seals fight alone is a bit too much, so, when it's time for you to explode, just explode yourself. Don't feel bad. Of course you don't feel bad. I'm in pain. Women are meant to be loved. After saying goodbye to his parents, Wang Lu spurred his horse to go over the mountain ridges. It only took him 2 days to return to the Spirit Sword Mountain. He ran like a dead dog. The Spirit Creek town at the foot of the Spirit Sword Mountain was still the same desolate scene. Without the economic pull of the Immortal Gathering, the Spirit Creek town immediately returned to its original state. However, the town's residents obviously didn't care about whether the town was prosperous or not. They still lived their comfortable life in an orderly manner. As the residents of the Lingjian school, these several hundred people were neither cultivators nor ordinary mortals. Each of them had a rich story. If one carefully dug out, there was no time to dig out this kind of irrelevant side story. In big strides, Wang Lu rushed into the core building of the Spirit Creek town, the Ru family inn. Lady boss, are you there? *T, what are you shouting for? It's not easy for me to fall asleep. The lady boss behind the counter weakly threw the rag in her hand. Didn't you go out for experiential learning? Why did you come back? Did your IQ drop? Seeing the familiar face, Wang Lu was pleasantly surprised. Sister Ling. *T, don't call me that disgusting. Who's your sister Ling? The lady boss lazily raised her eyelids, but when she saw Wang Lu, she suddenly froze. Not only was he travel-worn and tired, this was the first time the lady boss saw the hesitation on Wang Lu's face. Obviously, this youth had a big problem in his heart. Because he couldn't solve it by himself, he came back to the mountain to ask for help? However, this guy has been in the sect for 2.5 years. Has he ever been stuck by a problem? He really hasn't. This time he only went down the mountain for a little more than a week. What exactly happened to him that gave him such a big blow? Little Ling Er frowned. She fully invoked her more than 30 years of life experience. Little Wang Lu, could it be that you are lovelorn? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.